Good morning, everybody. The Committee on General Governmental Operations and Cultural Affairs will now come to order. Today's informational briefing has been set to discuss the Competitive Wage Act of 2014, more commonly known as the HAY Plan. Absent legislative action, the HAY Plan, as approved by the Governor, will lapse into law on February 14th. Yet, as the administration's own press release dated January 15th indicates, Governor Calvo's HAY Plan is a departure from its 2010 predecessor in several ways. One, the inclusion of unclassified employees, more specifically elected officials and political employees. Two, an additional $13 million in annual payroll costs. Three, the addition of two grades W and X. Four, the phased-in increase of general pay plan employees who will receive approximately 50% when the plan takes effect and receive full wage increase by August 2014. Employees under other pay plans, example teachers, nurses, and attorneys, will receive full increase upon implementation of the plan. And last, the pay cap lift for senior employees, allowing for incremental pay increases based on performance. Moreover, the committee is in receipt of a letter from the Chief Justice of Guam, the Honorable Robert J. Torres, stating that the Governor's inclusion of the judiciary in the 2014 HAY Plan is both contrary to local law and the Organic Act. This statement joins a growing list of alleged errors and disparities brought to the committees since the public announcement of this hearing just 2 days ago. In that time, we have been told government positions have been excluded from the plan as proposed, that senior personnel may only exceed the listed number of pay steps under review process not clearly understood by all, and that no rational, methodical approach was undertaken in determining substantial pay raises for the political class. Given the substantive nature of these changes, those admitted by the Governor and those alleged by others in the community, the possibility that there may be other changes that are requiring the legislative action, and the rapidly approaching deadline, I respectfully request the Department of Administration officials present the following information. One, a full briefing on all differences between 2010 and 2014 HAY Plan, the reasoning, method, and purpose behind each change, and answers to any technical questions asked by the members of the committee. In addition to this information, the Committee on Appropriations requested that the following be provided by no later than today at the start of this hearing. One, any and all calculations performed by DOA in anticipation and or prior to the submission of this plan in a Microsoft Excel file. This should include DOA's calculation as to the expected total cost of the plan, inclusive of its recommendation for FY 2014. The information should include details of personnel information by fund, by agency, by employee name, by position title, by grade, by step, by salary amount and type, by benefit amount and type, by pay plan type, etc. More specific details as to the slotting of existing employees into the proposed pay plan scales that were not included in DOA's original submission to the legislature. Three, any change to the recommendations of either the salary or the position title in the classified or unclassified pay scale that is different from the HAY Plan of 2010, and the reasons and source used to justify the change, inclusion, or exclusion. And four, any and all calculations performed by DOA that show in detail the total cost of the law enforcement pay increases by fund, by agency, by employee name, by position title, by grade, by step, by salary amount and type, by benefit amount and type, etc. This should all be provided in the Microsoft Excel file. This statement joins the growing list of alleged errors and disparities brought to this committee since the public announcement of this hearing just 2 days ago. In that time, we have been told that before we proceed, I would like to ask the Director of Administration if she's ready to provide the information requested. You may come forward, please, with your administrator. Madam Director, you've received my letter calling for this hearing, and I forwarded the letter from Chairman Pangilinan. Will you be able to provide us with the information today?
Senator, I'm here with my HR staff that worked on the plan, and the information that you're requesting is a culmination of years of review process. There are thousands and thousands of documents, and we also have software that was used to go through this process. And given the short amount of time that you requested the information, we're not able to program the system to extract the information that you're requesting. But we're here to respond to any questions that any members of this committee or the legislature may have.
If we were to allow you for additional time to provide the information, how soon could you provide it to us?
Like I said, we would have to go back and maybe contact the company that gave us the software to tweak the program to see if we could extract those information. And I have my HR people that are the ones that are using that program.
All right, then at this time, I will use this opportunity. I'll get to you in a second. Probably at this time, to notify everyone that we will I will use this time as the beginning of my 5-day notice for a full public hearing to be conducted next Friday at 12, at noon next Friday. All right? Okay. But we will continue today to at least get some of the answers. And I also would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the government employees in attendance and those wishing to provide comment. This committee will receive each of your comments after the informational briefing has concluded. I do want to make a couple of points clear on the record. This briefing is called with the intention of not called with the intention of stopping any pay raises for classified employees or the qualified counterparts in the unclassified service. Instead, we simply want to know what was changed between 2010 HAY Plan and the 2014 HAY Plan. Why was it changed, and under what rational basis these changes are made and funded? The conduct of this briefing will be as follows. When speaking, please ensure that the microphone is on and that you're speaking into the microphone. The chairman will invite representatives of the Department of Administration first. Individuals testifying shall state their name and purpose. The order of question will begin with the chairman, who shall complete his questioning, and then others will follow. And at this point, I'm sorry, Senator Pangilinan, you had a comment?
With regards to the requests for the information, Mr. Speaker, that the Department of Administration's director says they're not able to provide, I want to say that they've provided this information in the past. They provided it in the 2010 HAY study, those calculations. In order to be able to know how much this is going to cost, I would assume that they had calculated this thing and slotted these employees. These are personnel files that are readily available. We believe that this information can be provided. My understanding, even in that informal conversations with Department of Administration personnel, that this information is already existing and that DOA did not want to release the information in draft form. So perhaps we can bring the technical people that have done the calculations on assessing the cost of this and the cost on how existing employees will be affected and bumped to so that we can actually get the information. Mr. Ngata, maybe you may be able to shed additional light on the information that's been provided in the past.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, we do have a lot of raw data, and that's basically derived of what goes into the AS400, and we do have a separate system that we use as an HRS for our office. The issues we're having now is kind of a twofold issue. We do have to reprogram it to put it out in the format that's requested. We do have the raw data for what you're asking, but on a grander note, we're kind of reallocating resources right now to start the new cycle for GPD and DOC. It's going to be a big recruitment, and it does require majority of our staff to sort through and look for any kind of justifications, and even just the differences that we're looking at and the justification for all of that requires a lot of them to go back and sift through everything that we've done approximately 4 or 5 years ago. And so at this time, we put the plan in, and while we're waiting for it to be approved, we're shifting focus over to recruiting as we were directed to make it a priority. So
But
to
how-
answer your question, we do have the data. It's just a matter of trying to put it all together.
Well, how are you going to be able to implement it by February 14th if you don't have that data? And how are you going to slot these employees if you don't have that data?
The system that we're using now, and it's actually the logic for implementation was programmed into it as in 2010. So extracting it and putting it in the report format that you require is what we're trying to do right now, and we are working to try and do it. We're trying to find a way to do it in that format. But what had happened is we had to shift our focus over to other priorities while we're waiting to see if this goes into play.
But I thought this was the priority, to be able to put all this so that you can do it by February 14th.
It is, and it can happen, depending on what's if there are any amendments made to the plan. So,
But we don't know what to amend because we don't have those details.
yeah, and
The employees don't know where they're going to go. I mean, it's the employees that are asking for this so that they know how they're going to be affected
Right.
by the implementation of the plan.
Right.
And if you don't put that out like you did in 2010, then they don't know.
Yeah, actually, in 2010, what we did is we waited till the plan was officially approved through executive order, as the law dictated back then. At which time we issued actual slotting sheets for each individual employee. At this point in time, they are calling our office, and we're basically telling them it's premature to issue it because we wouldn't want to set them up for any kind of false expectation on what the plan may ensue. So,
But if you put it out now, they know it, and that's what gets approved, then there's no false expectations.
true, but just from our standpoint and our experience with the employees, that's we don't want to try and cause anything that might not.
But that's what caused those questions, is they didn't know that. If they know it up front, then those questions could be resolved.
And it's the same process we followed in 2010. Basically, is what we're doing.
No, because the submittal here does not have the slotting information or anything at all.
And in 2010, what was given to the governor at the time pursuant to that law, the slotting information wasn't given to him as well.
To the legislature and what was finally approved.
I have to check. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll proceed at this time. Madam Director, please. I'm giving you the opportunity to make an opening statement and do the presentation to explain how you arrived at what was presented to the governor and the governor transmitting to us.
Public Law 32-68 authorized the governor to put together an implementable plan to adjust compensation for classification and benefits to be approved by the legislature. And this plan shall include classified and unclassified employees, and it appropriated funding for that for phased-in implementation. And what DOA did was they went back to the plan that was temporarily implemented in 2010 and went back through all the years of data that Hay had prepared, and also DOA had gathered from the departments, and they proceeded to review the plan, collected reviewed the information, and came up with the plan that is before you now for approval.
You have nothing to show me that with all the you have nothing to show me that with all the categories that you have, that the 2010 Hay Plan had accountants at M. Under 2014, you have them at L, and explaining why they went from M to L, or the other way around. I'm sure you've heard me, since 1990, I have complained about the way the Hay Plan is done and how excuse me, Shane, and all human resource people, how human resource people have managed to work it in their favor. The administrator for human resources in government of Guam, under this 2014, gets a T. Higher than the treasurer and others, but in other departments, as I understand it, the financial people in the other departments, their people, the finance people, get a higher rating than the HR people in those departments, but somehow in administration. And the reason why I've been watching HR with this was because in 1990, when I was still at the court, I went through the ceiling when it came out and the human resource people got more than my attorneys. And I couldn't understand how that was possible. And there's lots of questions. I mean, I could go on for the rest of the day, and I'm sure many out there will have their own anecdote of the problems that they're having with the way that this is presented and the inequities that they perceive. And so I'm just trying to figure out, surely you have a methodology, Shane, that you can share with a group on how each one of these things was arrived at, or how these were arrived at as a group or as something to satisfy the panel here that it wasn't capricious and arbitrary, that there was a method to this madness.
Thank you for bringing that point up, and it is something that deserves clarification. I'll start with the first point. The analysis you're looking for, as far as pay grades and anything that's changed between 2010 and 2014, the list that was submitted is the same list that we used in 2010. The reasoning for that is in 2010, we didn't get to execute the appeals process for any employee to come in and appeal their pay grade. This time around, we wanted to make sure that the employees did have that opportunity to go in and talk to us about their pay grades, file any appeals or any kind of concerns they had so we can address it. That was the motivation for not changing what was in 2010. We believe that it was
So every
proper.
category in the 2014 is identical to 2010.
It should be, yes. We use the same list. And to go further
Not talking about the list. I'm talking about the letter grade that's given to you.
Yes,
Just
yes.
talking.
It's actually the attachment with the report. This list itself was printed from the same list that we used in 2010. And to go further into your questions as far as the human resources professionals, and I know a lot of my colleagues either wanted to be here or are here today. It's actually a stigma that will never leave any human resource professional when conducting a study like this, because it is sensitive to the pay of an individual. We will never escape that stigma of being self-serving. If you're looking specifically at the DOA HR administrator, the last time this position was assessed was in 1980. 91 gave it a grade of Q. It's been 20 years since the mandates have grown for DOA as a whole, in particular the T. So in the 2014 study, we didn't touch it because in 2010 the consultants actually did the review for all of DOA. We wanted to stay apart from that. We didn't touch it. I myself was a personnel specialist 3, a staff that worked closely with the consultant, and basically they derived these pay grades. Nothing was touched, so that's the point we have to get across. Other HR administrators and staff will probably reiterate the same point. There's no getting around any kind of misconception that it would be self-serving. Even if we gave ourselves a lower grade, that's probably what's demanded by opinion. But it wouldn't be fair to all of my staff back here and staff of other HR agencies if we were able to do that. So that's to answer that question. And on a level playing field for all the positions, we are looking at building in an appeals process. No matter what form this plan goes through, there will be an appeal process for this list. It's in the works. We are consulting with the Civil Service Commission because they do have an appellate authority, and trying to vet this out so that employees have that opportunity to go through their grades. So, hopefully that answers your questions and your concerns. If not, if you want to talk more specifically about the Hay method, it is a lengthy process to evaluate positions. You don't become, very fluent in it unless you use it on a daily basis. This review required us to look at over 4,000 documents and evaluate 1,300 positions, those of which DOA don't use on a daily basis from other autonomous agencies. We did work closely with Hay to make sure that they were evaluated. We formed committees that were a slice of the population of the professions in the line agencies to gain their input as we were looking at other and also try to maintain integrity, we had them step out of the room when we did their own jobs, so we avoid any kind of bias. Are there evaluations that may be off? Maybe, and that's another reason why we want to have the appeal process there. Employees may be concerned about pay grades that are, maybe downgraded. The key thing we did in 2010, which we're looking at doing now, is the caveat is no one loses any pay. So if the grade did go down, they'll maintain their salary going into the new pay plan. That was something that was done in '91, which we chose. It worked. You don't want anyone to lose pay via study. Second, through the appeal process, they'll have the opportunity to tell us what their jobs look like. If their documentation, for whatever reason, wasn't included in 2010, they'll have the opportunity to give us their documentation. We'll assess what we looked at in 2010, what they have now, and we'll reassess the evaluation. It was done in a similar fashion in '91, but I believe their appeal process took almost 3 years. And some of you senators were in this body when that took place. We anticipated similar concerns coming out of this, therefore we built it into the actual process. Unfortunately, in 2010, it was implemented without us fully developing the process before we can go forward. This time around, we're comfortable, we're ready. We do want to give the employees that opportunity to talk to us and say, this is what we're looking at. If there are any other concerns, vetting that, as always, we do take them in and consider them.
I understand that the HR personnel from all the departments were called in yesterday. Would either one of you care to inform the senators about how that went and why it took so long to get there? Because as I understand it, I was confronted by the head of a major subdivision of government, not necessarily a branch, but a major department, who said that they just weren't included in the implementation discussion and wanted to know how they were supposed to implement this. And do I understand that you met yesterday, and how did that meeting go?
Well, actually, my assistant human resources manager staffed the meeting. We tried to gain input and feedback from the other HR administrators. A lot of it, the conversation was, we had a long process of vetting this out with them in 2010, and they brought up a lot of concerns. Through that process and through the last 3 years, it's kind of been on a stagnant, okay, let's see where we go from here point. The feedback, from my understanding, and if my colleagues are here, they can come up and share their concerns if they have any more that maybe just came to them since the meeting. But a lot of it was, where are we going to go from here? What does it look like? A lot of them have done certain things in their agencies. They just want to see how it's going to impact their employees. Without the pay scales and the pay grades and positions moving forward, any kind of talk of actual implementation policies and how it affects those agencies, it's at a standstill at this point.
If your testimony today is that every single category that's in this 2014 plan has the same letter category that was in the 2010 plan, how many man hours were spent by HR personnel at DOA to come up with the same plan, not do anything about it? And would DOA have done better to have spent more hours with their financial people to answer the concerns that the good chairman of appropriations is asking, of trying to figure out how are we going to be able to afford what at least initially, I guess you guys are saying is going to cost $20 million. Do we have anything that shows where and how that $20 million is being broken down? And with the $7 million appropriation that has been given by this legislature, how are you going to implement that? Who gets? The law enforcement people have been calling me and emailing me, I think, into the night, because some people got their retro, others didn't. Other employees have been calling me because of the fact that meritorious increases were given to certain departments, but other departments never got any money, nor a branch of government received sufficient funds to pay their meritorious pay. So how are we going to equitably implement this so that all the employees benefit from this as opposed to just the favored few or what? And can you provide us with surely there's got to be something, Benita. This couldn't have. How did we arrive at the 20 million? There has to be something somewhere that you can provide us to see that breakdown. How much is it going to cost for the judiciary to do theirs? How much is it going to cost DOE? Just by itself, the largest department, how much is this plan going to cost DOE? And how are you planning the implementation of that so that they don't end up with the same problem that we had with the meritorious increase, where they were given 3 years and everybody else was given 20?
Senator, the calculation for what it's going to cost is based on the software that HR has for the slotting, and this is when they slotted the positions of where these employees are going to be, that was the estimate that they came up with, that it was going to cost about 20 million.
I understand,
Yes.
but can you provide us with I mean, I know that the chairman of appropriations wanted the
Okay.
names and the numbers, but at least for DOE, I don't want all 2,000 names, but I want to know DOE. This is how much it's going to cost us to implement this for the teachers, and that this is how we're going to allot the 7 million, and this is how we're going to try to figure out how we're going to find with the remaining 13 million to make sure that DOE doesn't get screwed again by only having 3 years as opposed to everybody else getting 20. Or the law enforcement people getting retro in a couple of agencies, but the AG's office calling me and emailing me until 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, and the courts people concerned about the fact that they're not getting their retro, but everybody else got retros. We've got to be able to implement this so that we all move together.
I understand, Senator, what you're saying, but in the Budget Act and in 32-68 that was passed, there was the allocation that was made already of how much each agency is going to get and how much the judiciary is going to get, how much DOE is going to get. So they would have to do their increases based on. I mean, they would use that funding to implement the plan.
But for us to make a decision on what we're going to do, and we know that we have appropriated 7 million.
That's correct.
And so in order to be able to fully implement this, present to us, you will need to appropriate an additional $6 million to DOE. What?
That's
2
the-
million,
that's-
something so that we know what we need, what we're facing.
that-
All we
that-
got, the attachments don't have any of that on it.
That's the reason why it is a phased-in approach, and that's how it's going to be implemented for 2014, because it's based on what was appropriated.
Then can you explain to us how you're phasing it in, and who's going to get money when and how much?
Well, we can provide that information to you when we get back, but it's going to. We had programmed the 7 million already. We had programmed that into our cash flow, and that's based on what that was appropriated. So
Well, with that
was
program into the cash flow and the governor announcing that February 14th we're all going to get a big box of candy, how much is going to be in that box of candy for everybody out there?
Of course, the 7 million is all not going to be distributed on February 14th. That's going to be for the rest of the fiscal year. So that's how we manage the cash. We will release the cash as it comes in, and everyone will get what is allotted to them.
And what do we tell the people now? What can they be
What
expecting?
can they expect? Well, just implement the plan, and we will take care of the cash. We will take care that. We will ensure that each government agency, each branch will get their share of what is allocated to them. This is as far as I'm concerned at this point. This is a cash management issue. We already already received the appropriation, the authority to move forward, to implement this. Once you bless the plan, then let's proceed.
And is this sustainable? I mean, you have a 15% reserve account for everybody in government right now, right?
It's 10.
10, all right, the 10%. I reviewed the Standard & Poor report for 2011 and 2012, which extolled the fact that the government of Guam is very responsible, and we're upgrading them because of the fact that, and there's very specific language in both the 2011 and 2012, which I commend you because you managed to sell Standard & Poor's on it, that the governor was being fiscally responsible by not implementing and issuing an executive order stopping the Hay Plan. Is this going to affect our credit rating, and will it be sustainable so that we're not considered to be in any fiscal jeopardy?
Well, Senator, going back to 2010 when the Hay this study was implemented, the pay plan was implemented, the government was in over several $100 million of deficit, and the legislature saw it that it was sustainable at that time. Now we are 2014, and we have eliminated the deficit, and we are in a surplus, and it's going to cost an additional $13 million to implement. I believe that it will be sustainable. We have gone through the numbers, and it's been 20 years that the employees have not had any pay increase.
I don't doubt that. As I said, I fully support the increase for the employees, and all I'm trying to make sure is that it's not a hollow promise, that we're going to increase, but then your departments are all going to get a 20% hold for the rest of the fiscal year, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to do this in payroll as opposed to any place else.
And that is the reason
so I'm trying to figure out. There has to be some kind of financial report that you can provide to us that shows that to us so that we can feel comfortable with it.
Well, if you go back to 2010 when we suspended the plan because it was not fiscally
How about
sustainable.
today? How about today? Can
we
you
have
provide
been-
us with a financial statement for today without the 10% hold on all the departments? Would you be able to move forward with this? Or will we have to go up to 20%? That's all I'm trying to figure out. Yes, you managed to make ends meet. I noticed from the end of the fiscal year report that you issued that the Department of Administration ended up with a $20 million deficit. How that happens, I don't know. But then I realized that it was the meritorious increases bonuses that you provided, and that accounted for the $13 million deficit over expenditure in Department of Administration's budget. In your expenditures for the year. It's shocking that the Department of Administration is running a $20 million deficit. We started your term with my questioning it, and at this point I'm looking at it again, and I looked at the statement, and I was like, how is that possible? That this
that was
20
a that was a one-line item for the meritorious pay. That's how it was recorded by the auditors. That's how we were told to record, and it's based on what was the appropriation level for the whole year. We looked at what the expenditure level is for the entire government, and we didn't go beyond. But we were able to pay the meritorious bonus.
Okay, can you at least all right, I'll let this really was I just grabbed a hold of it. I'm not sure even if I had jurisdiction, but I think the appropriations chair is the one that's going to have to make the determination of how much money. So I'll ask him to ask some questions, then my vice chair.
I think what I'd like to focus on is how is the plan going to affect the employees in its implementation. And that's the biggest question we have. And in the submittal by the governor, if the employees looked at it and they said, I don't know where I'm going to go, I don't know how I'm going to fit in. Now, if you're saying that you used the 2010 recommendations by Hay and the 2010, for example, submittal and approval of the plan included things like ensure the policies and procedures for the implementation included things like unclassified positions. It describes what happens when you're at the maximum. It resolved. You said that the new plan resolves compression pay, but it doesn't say that anywhere in what you submitted. So if what you submitted is what you're asking, all you really are submitting is the pay plan, the pay scale. There's no process that says how the plan is going to be implemented and how it's going to affect the employees. And that's the biggest question to employees. Are you telling me that in determining the costs and slotting these employees, you use the same methodology and the same procedures and policies that was put in 2010, but resolve some of the outstanding issues like compression pay and hitting the ceiling, and that you change those, or you're going to change those? If you're telling me, then can we just say then that this will be the implementation plan in terms of looking at where you go, what happens when you're at a pay grade, what happens to slotting, what happens if your increase is less than 3.8%? Do you get an additional, do you get bumped up, or and nobody gets bumped down? Are those the same things that you did in doing the analysis for the allocation of the money that will resolve those issues? And can we now say that we're now going to approve the 2010 policies and procedures, because that's what you used anyway to submit what the pay plan itself, and then move forward on that so that the employees know, and then they know what to appeal. They can look right now and say, and then put it in the appeals process. If you said you've resolved the appeals process, you have that, can we put it in here so the employees know what the appeals process is? Again, these are the details that the employees are asking us, because all that you submitted to the legislature is the pay scale, the pay, and then the steps. Is there a difference in steps? Is there 18 steps here and 20 in 210, or 20 in 18 in 210 and 20 now? What are those changes that are going to affect those employees, Shane? And I'm sure you've made those decisions because you had to do that in order to do calculations. You can't tell me that you didn't do that decision at all, because I just know you're professionals, and that's how this was done. So you've done all the work that we're asking you. You just got to share them with us and share them with the employees. And that's really what we're asking, is fairness for that, so that we don't have to backtrack, and that the employees know exactly how they're going to do it. And with the allocation of the $7 million, when you're saying you're going to put 50% implementation, what does that mean? What does that mean when with the $7 million? Is the $7 million going to cover 50% implementation for the general pay plan? And again, the decision the employees are asking is, they're saying that you want to fully fund the implementation of the law enforcement, the nurses, the teachers, and the attorneys. So once you fully fund those, how much of the $7 million is going to be allocated to those guys? Is it going to be $5 million of the $7 million to fully fund that? And now for the rest of the employees, you now only got $2 million, and is that going to do 50%, or is not going to do 50%? I think that's what we need to do with regards to the implementable portion of the implementation of this plan. And the other question we have is, the teachers, the attorneys, and the nurses have had increases by legislation, as you put in your report, prior to the implementation of the Hay plan. Yet they're going to get full implementation of the Hay plan, but the general pay plan, who's never moved for 20 years, are only going to get 50%. And what's the rationale for taking people up to 100% for those that have had increases already over the last 5-10 years, and 50% for those that have not have any increases at all over the last 20 years. Why the difference in the treatment of that? So that's really, our questions.
Just so I could answer it properly, I'm just going to go through your questions.
Sure.
I was trying to remember them, but writing them down now. So, your first question is based on the policies and procedures
Mhm.
of 2010. Okay, let me just get that. Procedures 2010. Your second question, the money questions, I'll leave for my director to answer as far as the allocations. We don't control the accounts and how they're allocated.
But you have to have in order to slot those positions.
Yeah. The way we do it, we're slotting the positions. How the money is actually moved around, we don't get involved in that process, and we wouldn't even try. We know it's a very complicated one. The policies and procedures. My answers to you on that one is yes and no. If you look at 2010, the policies and procedures that were issued, it kind of correlates with Exhibit 7 in the plan that we submitted. 2010 did have slotting policies and procedures, which we presented to the governor for approval via the law that authorized the governor to go ahead and approve that plan. In essence, that law gave the governor the authority through executive order to go ahead and move the plan forward. So that's what we implemented via that. A lot of the logic that was in the 2010 policies and procedures will stay the same, but them in and of themselves won't work with the scales that have been proposed today. In Exhibit 7, we did mention that we went to 18 steps instead of what you may have seen in 2010, which were hybrid scales for the GPP, the nurse pay plan, which we were trying to move into having ranges instead of actual steps. It caused a lot of problems, and I'm sure some of you remember in 2010 when there was a public hearing for Bill 469, which we were trying to clean up certain things and ask for more money. There were a lot of problems, and after 3 years, the feedback we got from employees was a lot of them like to see where they're going to be going on an annual basis. And so, like you said, we did address some of those concerns in the scales that we have today. We stepped it out instead of keeping hybrid ranges. And we know there's a lot of resistance to that big of a transition. It was recommended in Hay at the time to go with the trend of what's happening in other districts, bringing it back. 2014, we went back and looked at it. We said, okay, some things don't work in other districts, that would work here. So to answer your question, yes and no. For instance, in the policies and procedures in 2010, when you're looking at things like promotions, it won't work with these scales because these scales possess steps in them. And a lot of the reason why, we don't want to go ahead and issue policies and procedures, and we do know, employees are calling us on a daily basis.
So how does the employee know whether he's a yes or a no with regards to the policy? That they fall under the yes or they fall under the no.
Right, and the main caveat, and these are things that, if the compensation structure itself is approved, these are things that we'll have to have ready to go. Let me just jump to the second question before I forget my answer. You were talking about your second was policies and procedures. Your second question was based on which one? It's based on slotting procedures. What was the second question? That's 2010 slotting. If you can repeat yours. Sorry, I was trying to remember. There was a lot of questions. And we do have justification for it. The other main differences, if you want to go ahead and go to Exhibit 7, because we tried to highlight what we were looking at as far as that. Let me go down that line and just read through that so we can go ahead. Salary increment schedule, and this is one of the major changes we had from 2010. In 2010, we were recommending an annual performance evaluation waiting period instead of the current schedule we have now. We looked at how that would impact agencies, and a lot of feedback we got from employees were, man, this is just, it's too complicated to understand. We wanted to have an easier transition for employees to, like you said, Senator, to figure out where they're going to go. Grades A through X. In 91, we approved A through V. And what we found is when trying to slot positions in certain pay grades, especially for the higher management positions that have evolved over time, there was a ceiling where we couldn't go any higher. And it's just allowing more flexibility at the higher end.
But that flexibility is more towards the executive pay plan and doesn't generally resolve the issues of the general pay plan.
Yeah, in essence, and it's really a case by case, depending on, like, departments will come to us and say, hey, we need a position. For instance, military affairs said, hey, we need an anti-terrorism position. And it's new positions that come up based on need that we need to go ahead and have an appropriate grade. And that goes into the actual, evaluation of the grades. The 18-step structure that I was talking about, we had ranges in those structures, but this time we decided to put steps into it. A lot of the complaints that came in 2010 were, wow, I just stopped at 13 steps. And it was a recommendation of the consultant at the time to freeze a lot of employees at max. The logic behind that was because that's the range that market pays for that kind of position. At the time, we said, okay, if that's how we're looking, and they kind of trended it on a lot of federal jobs and how other state governments are doing it, we said, you know what, let's look at how we're currently administering it. There basically is no freeze at the max, but we have that indicator of what the total range looks like. And that's handled through compensation policy. It was first developed by the Civil Service Commission. We inherited and agreed that it should be continued so that employees don't get frozen. So that's how we currently administer the pay plan for those who reach the maximum of their pay scales. The merit bonus program suspension, the governor did ask us to look into how it works, and I know there are issues, Senator, you said, with the actual payouts of merit bonuses and the statute limitation versus going back to 91. But in this, in and of itself, the governor asked us to look at the performance evaluation system program and merit bonus and how it can be reassessed. And so, that's another ongoing project that we have.
But that's not in this implementation.
No, and it won't be. What usually happens is when you put in a new pay plan, what follows suit is the reassessment of the evaluation system for employees to have movement on that pay plan. A very good model actually was done by GPA when they updated their pay plan. They did a lot of work into reassessing their performance evaluation system, and they should be commended on how they did that. We'd like to follow suit. GPA has shown that it worked in that route, so we'll update the plan and move forward on the performance evaluation system. And it is a very large task, having to rein in the different systems that are out there. Different departments have different kinds of measures. Trying to get all of that together and make it a cohesive system, and then try to apply the merit bonus law to it is a huge task. So we didn't want to put it forward. And then, of course, additional positions. I know there were some questions. Some agencies said their positions were left out. 3268 basically asked us to use the information that we derived from 2952 and Executive Order 2006-21. That information was what was collected between 2008 and 2010. Looking back at that information, yes, there were a lot of documents that were submitted. We spent months, day in, day out, rummaging through 4,000 plus documents. I personally inventoried all of those. So there were some that were good, some that weren't filled out right. It's just a process of having employees bring that to our attention. We look and see what was done and see whether or not it's an issue that needs to be addressed. There are other problems, in the agencies, some misclassified employees who are doing jobs probably that they're not supposed to be doing because it's not the position that they currently hold. Those need to be addressed down another avenue.
I know. See, all of that work's done.
Mm-hmm.
You know all that work.
Right.
And so all of that is going to be part of your implementation plan and those changes.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't know what they are.
Can
you tell us what they are? Can you put it in writing? Can you just submit it to this body, and so that the employees can look at it?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, you can change anything. We approve the pay plan and the pay scale, but you can change the entire implementation procedure. You can change the fact that you're not going to do 50% you can reverse it. You can decide, we're going to do 100% for the general pay plan and 50% for these others because they've gotten those increases before. We don't know how you're going to do it. And I think that's what the employees want to know. So that they can see. Right now with this, they can't tell how they're going to be affected.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our concern here, is that when we say we're going to approve it, we want to approve something that the employees will have enough information on to see how they're going to be affected. I think that's very important to them. And I'm saying that's what's missing here. And that's why we're asking for that information. And I'm telling you, you talk to your staff, they have that information. As a matter of fact, they told us it's all in draft form.
Mm-hmm.
And you've said it. It's in draft form, but you don't want to put it out. Why not?
And we followed, historically, especially in '91, it was actually done in the same fashion that we're looking at now.
I know, but
I know
we've
there
done
was some
all that work already.
right,
So,
and
so we know that process.
Mhm.
We know the implementation. If you're just implementing the pay plan and the pay scale, all of that process really should be the same, shouldn't it?
um, as far as 2010, I mean, looking at the differences between what the
80.
structure looks like now, especially in '91. So what happened in '91? Basically, the plan was set forth, recommendations were made, pay grades, scales, just like now. Once 2159 was passed, Civil Service Commission then issued the policies and procedures subsequent to the passing of the actual Salary Administration Act back then. And we're following the same model. We're looking at a lot of what worked back then and what didn't. One of the biggest things that didn't work, which then called for subsequent legislation, was the appeal process. We didn't want to wait to try and get that going.
So is that same appeal process going to be governed by this?
It will should these pay structures and pay grades be approved.
Okay.
And it is our official recommendation
Can you send that appeals process down to us? Can you let the employees know what that is?
we will, and we're
Now,
actually,
before we approve it.
well, we could, but, again,
Why not?
we like to work
what's
with
the
what's been
danger?
approved, right?
No, because you're saying that's the same appeal process that you're going to use. So, what do we need to approve when you're saying that's what you're going to use?
Well,
then let us approve what you're going to use.
just in
So
our
that
analysis,
it doesn't change.
just in our
after we
analysis
approve
and the
this.
usual practice from what we've seen historically, typically we're going to put this, plan out, and we're going to wait for it to be approved. Any policies and procedures we try to execute afterwards, whether or not it's policies that are authorized by 4GCA or whether or not it's something that was specific to this, we don't have any bearing or authorization to say that's it. This is what the policy is going to
No,
look like.
we're asking you to submit
without
it
it
to
being
us so
approved.
that you're already saying that's what you're going to use. You're already saying the implementation is going to be governed by that. Why don't you submit it as part of the implementation plan?
In case anything here changes, we need to be sure that the policies that we execute afterwards follow suit. And we don't like to move on those policies unless we actually have structurally what we're going to move forward with. We wouldn't want to tell an employee they're going to end up at a certain step, and then should something change, and I'm not saying anything would change, but should something change, we wouldn't be able to administer it properly. And I do understand your point, Senator, because we are getting calls as well.
Yeah, that's right.
And we know that there is a lot of questions surrounding this plan. There were questions in 2010.
So what would your recommendation be in order to resolve those questions for the employees in terms of putting into the implementation plan and what you have submitted?
Mhm.
What would you send down here that resolves those questions that we can put in here?
Well, basically, our
would
communication with
those
the employees right now is, yes, we are developing policies that we're not trying to deviate too much from 2010. That's why my answer to you was yes and no. We're not trying to deviate too much from 2010, but we are trying to address issues that came up in 2010.
I know. So can you tell us what you're going to do in 2010 that you're not going to deviate from? And then is it 80%, 90% of those procedures you're not going to deviate from, that you're not going to have to deviate from? And these 20% that you're going to deviate from, these are what you're going to deviate from, and send that to us. You already know what they are.
Mhm. Well, I'd have to discuss with Benita. I mean, it eventually goes
I
to
would
her.
hope so.
Yeah, but like I said, yes and no. It is the same, but there are some changes that were made to address problems that
I
happened.
know, and we want to
Yeah.
know that, and so do the employees.
Yeah, and
And that's really it.
to that effect,
And then, of course, like you say, the financial documents
right.
and the financial issues of how much everybody's going to get, and whether or not you are going to be able to implement the 50% or the 100%,
And
or are
just
you going to run out of money?
and just so we're clear, because I do want to understand where the
Sure.
body as a whole is coming from. So the model that historically has been used to update the pay plan for the government as a whole, should we assume then that it's not a working model, and we should then move forward with just basically giving everything that needs to be done? There's a lot of research that's done and historical basis that we use to develop these policies and procedures. We do take a lot of feedback into consideration and do a lot of research. The current model dictates that we submit the plans in and of themselves and execute the policies after it's approved, therefore giving us the authority to go ahead and execute those policies. If that model isn't what's currently going to work, then the body itself, if they express that to us, then we'll have to discuss it with the director as far as how we want to proceed. And if that's the case, Senator, then yes, it would help to answer a lot of the questions.
Yes,
And that's just what I'm trying to
And that's
understand.
what we want to do.
Okay.
That's what we want to provide that opportunity.
Okay.
And again, that's very important because, we're trying to resolve not our own personal concerns, but the concerns that have been brought to us by the employees to make sure that this happens in a smooth process, protecting the rights of the employees and giving them as much information as they require in order to see how it affects themselves, so that there are no expectations when we say we're going to take you up to 50% of the market, but this won't do it. And for the record, the legislature in the budget that it proposed for 2014 had proposed over $10 million for the hay, and it was in subsequent. Every time the governor vetoed a budget, he came back and reduced the appropriation from the hay. So this final $7 million number was not derived by the legislature. The final $7 million number for the hay plan was the last bill that was submitted by the governor, in which he continually reduced the hay plan requirement in subsequent bills entertained for the 2014 budget till this number was the final number submitted by the governor and that we adopted as what is being required in order to do so. So we want to know how that $7 million is going to affect the employees.
And I won't speak to the actual budget
Sure.
process, but and to your other point, Senator, I hope you can appreciate the fact that our department and our division, we do look out for the employees in the fashion that you're stating. We wouldn't recommend anything that would adversely affect the employee. We do understand that the expectation of pay raises, especially after not moving for 20 years, is high.
Yeah.
And as both the legislature and the governor have both explained, if there was, basically if there was just cash flowing, every issue could be addressed. And I think we came across this in 2010, where we were looking at $49 million to bring everyone up to market.
Right.
That would have, made everyone's day. And I hope you can appreciate that. My staff and I, we do work toward that goal all the time.
I'm
Whether
just
or not.
saying that
Okay, I think we've we beat this. Can I
And so-
just ask a few?
Sure.
Okay, I'll go my vice chair, then the speaker, then the minority leader, and the assistant minority leader.
Thank you very much, Vice Speaker. Thank you, folks, for coming in. I would like to acknowledge, Vice Speaker, the presence of the elected officials that are in the audience, the President of the Mayor's Council of Guam, Mayor McDonald, and also the Executive Director, Mr. Sablan, and all the mayors and the vice mayors that are here this morning. And I'd like to ask the question, I did receive some calls from some employees of the Mayor's Council, as they too seem that if this implementation is going through based on what was given on the 2010 plan and the 2014, were there any significant changes for the mayors and the vice mayors and also the employees? They too have said they haven't received anything. What was the communication for them to be all inclusive? I am also receiving calls like the disparity that's happening with some of the employee positions at the University of Guam. And I did tell the constituents, as they called, as a group, saying, what are they going to do for the disparity that we're more senior and that these positions that have come to play, it's like my 25 years of service doesn't match what the new employees are coming. I'm just, I don't have the
Let me
answer
just
to
write
that,
it down
anything.
so I can make
Yeah.
sure I get it. Oh, okay. So, Mayor's Council, we'll start with them. Currently, there were recommendations. We'll start with the employees. The way we operate now, and we do handle the administrative personnel side for the Mayor's Council, employees there are typically, they use classified titles. And the way that their Enabling Act works is if they do choose to use classified titles, which are administered by DOA, they use the pay that's associated, and developed by DOA. So the impact that employees there would see, because they're considered exempted or unclassified employees, would basically be if there was an increase in pay grade, not pay, it would then affect the hiring of those employees. So if there was an increase in pay grade, which may have an associated increase in pay, they would see that. For the mayors and vice mayors themselves, we did make recommendations to increase their pay based on job size and based on what they're looking at as far as role in the villages. It's a difficult thing to peg villages versus whole cities. But that was a change in that. As far as UOG, because I don't know the specifics of the request that came through your office, I'm only going to assume that these were people that were employees probably at the tail end of the pay scale. And I'm glad you asked that. If the pay scales that we included, originally had, and the ones that had steps only had 13. We actually moved it up to 18. And in moving it up to 18, toward the latter end of the pay scale, we created sort of a hybrid of what market would pay. So when you're looking at the front end, to address the retention issue, when you're in the latter end of the pay scale, you're actually where market would put you for that job. And it was one of the issues that came up first. Why are we getting frozen? We shouldn't get frozen when you hit max, or why am I not getting any increase? So we were looking at that and trying to put them into that. And we were trying to address it. Of course, we would have liked to. I mean, we explored the big opportunity of saying, hey, everyone get 5,000, 10,000, but it wouldn't be sustainable. But we did look at that option. So those are small ways we're trying to address those problems. And if once we get to the implementation stage, showing them, yes, it's not that our office doesn't look at the worth of an employee or even a person, and there's years of service. We know that's always an issue, not just here, but nationally. Having to retain the employees with that institutional knowledge, and to make sure that, should they decide to retire or resign, that transition of knowledge then makes it into the employees further down. So we did look into that, and those concerns were one of the biggest concerns that were brought up to us in 2010. And so we did actually put a lot of work into trying to figure out how we could address that without breaking the bank. And so to that effect, Senator, yes, we did try to look at that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker. The question I have for you was the same question that we had asked the Hay Study Group when they were here. Is the salaries, of course, for teachers, nurses, and others are specialized type of professions where you don't find them throughout the government, and they're not like secretaries, assistants, and technicians you'll find throughout the government. But specifically, teachers are not. They're just, of course, in educational institutions. And the idea here was to get them, of course, closer, if not to the national level. So the question I ask, of course, would be to ask whether that was actually done. Was it also reflective in terms of the degrees that they have earned, master's, bachelor's, and terminal degrees? Because I've heard many teachers say that they have a master's degree and they go into the education system, they work elsewhere, and they come in at the bottom, a master's degree at $28,000, and that does not match at all. And then the last thing, if you can add again for them, is the fact that, again, like everybody else, I'm sure, is that when they reach a certain level, then no longer then would you see any growth for them. If anything else, it might end up being a reduction as compared to the new plan for other individuals who would use it as a form of advancing.
Right.
Thank you.
I did. Okay. So, and thank you for bringing that question up. And we do know that teachers, and it is a tough job to try and gauge compensation for a teacher. Their worth to the society as a whole. Trying to quantify that into a salary always puts us in a peculiar position. So, what we try to rely on is are the numbers. In 2006, when DOA conducted the first teacher compensation study, we put a comprehensive amount of work into trying to gauge. We even looked at surveys that said, what do teachers do with their time outside of work? The Bureau of Labor and Statistics, DOL, actually quantified what those numbers would look like and what that would mean to overall compensation. They also tried to quantify what dollars would look like when you're looking at the kind of problems that each school district would deal with, to their own. So, what we tried to look at was in each of those pay plans, teachers, nurses, and law enforcement as well, the increases that they have gotten throughout the years, we wanted to see where that put them relative to what market in 2010 at the time, right, would have put them. And it put them closer. And what we're recommending is one of the biggest problems we got, and I think it was reiterated by other senators as well, is that there was no room for movement. The way they actually move within their series is handled by GDOE, the board, and the certification council, I believe. So all we wanted to do was create the mechanism and properly put the teachers where they need to be. Looking at the point of starting salaries for teachers have significantly increased. That was done so to try and promote the recruitment of teachers. And hopefully, back then the notion was to bring teachers home that may have gotten degrees elsewhere. Another point that we had is moving along the pay scale. You know, again, they only had 13 steps in 2010. We're looking at 18 now, so that they have room to move. Should they hit step 18, which would be significantly higher than what previous step 13 would have been, you know, the notion in 2010 was let's stop them. This time we're saying let's keep them going. You know, you don't want to adversely affect those teachers. And we're talking about teacher 4s, teacher 5s, teacher 6s. I mean, these teachers are probably ready to be principals or assistant principals, but choose to stay teaching because that's where they want to stay in their profession. You know, we want to have them to be able to move. Otherwise, the only option for them is to become an assistant principal or principal. And, you know, the additional management duties and administrative duties added to that kind of job, you know, and having to manage schools, whether they're double session or not, again, quantifying what that would pay them is a difficult task. So we did look into those factors, Senator. We do realize that, of course, not everyone will be happy with you know, increases they get. And, you know, we did try as much as possible to address those issues.
If I may, the first Hayes study, that was a blow to the teachers with bachelor's degree. And there were certain departments, divisions rather, within DOE without any degree whatsoever, but their salaries were much higher than teachers and definitely much higher than school administrators. And I hope that that discrepancy now would not be reflective of this new Hayes study, and that you take into consideration, of course, the years of schooling that they've gone through, that should be reflective, of course, and the work that they do, not just in the classroom in the school, but inclusive of after school hours.
Yes, and like I said, when and hopefully, you know, trying to separate, and I'm not sure if the positions you talk about, maybe the general positions, right, in the administration of the school. Managing those two pay plans was difficult, and trying to see how to get a meaningful bump for those who haven't moved in 20 years while still acknowledging the priority and the critical nature of the teaching profession, and trying to move them at points where, you know, we're trying to minimize the adverse effect it had. Key thing is no one lost pay. No one will ever lose pay with our recommendations. Trying to see how much money they can get will be relative both on where they stand now on the pay scale and what market dictates. But starting pay for sure, because that was our biggest problem, is that the starting pay in the government was that of 1991. So a 20-year lag, 20-plus year lag in pay meant we're starting teachers, bus drivers, nurses, not nurses, sorry, general accountants, auditors, pay that's just lags, and you know, we get constant emails from you know, like the Office of the Public Auditor, right, telling us, hey, our auditors don't earn enough, and she's right. Our local market would dictate that you know, they should earn more starting pay. That's rectified. Teachers, we're trying to move them up, and I know based on their critical nature, I don't know how much pay would be enough for a teacher, because a teacher is a teacher no matter where you go. And that's one of the conversations we did have with Hay back then, is how to address them and the very sensitive nature of that position.
So can you tell us whether in this 2010 Hayes study that the teachers' salaries then now will be comparable to the mainland?
Comparable. We're working
at the national level.
We're working there. In 2010, the benchmark we were looking at was trying to get to at least 85 or 90% of market, and we made steps when we did the 14%. So we're maintaining the 85% of market. You know, we assess the situation, and market will always move, whether it's 1% or 2%, and trying to build that in. I mean, we could definitely recommend a scale that would move, but you know, again, my director said the cash to back up the movement would be the issue. But yes, Senator, I mean, we have the tools and the resources to look at that, and definitely recommend it. But at this point, we won't be at par with market, and that'll be consistent with almost all the pay plans, except for maybe the law enforcement, who are almost there based on the 40%.
Thank you. The minority leader has just informed me that the speaker just asked this question, so the deputy minority leader. And then the majority leader and
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shane and Benita, I want to thank you and your team for all of your work. I want to invoke a statement by a mentor, a great mentor of mine, President Ronald Reagan. We're going to trust but verify.
Yes.
And so what I just have a statement, basically, one question with you, for you, Benita, and that is that the work that you've done, of course, we will never know, although we'll request the information and probably see it next week. We'll never know, of course, the full implementation, the appeals process, and everything that takes place until we implement it. And that's what we need to do, is to move forward and get this done. Benita, I have one question, and that is, I remember working, as the chairman said, through the budget process and what would be feasible with regard to maintaining your cash flow capability and the rest of the services in the government. Is that why you've taken this responsible step to have the implementation phased in so that you can manage the cash and manage the operations in the government?
Senator, that's correct.
And that's what I appreciate, because I think that will also answer some questions when some employees who are so deserving and have waited so long for what they need that and deserve, that when they see that it may not reach the expectations, understanding that it's phased in, that as the cash flow is available and the government can sustain it while doing all the rest of the operations of the government, then getting up to 100% will be gradual, and it'll also allow those who have appeals to come forward. So in a closing statement, because there's been a lot of media, reports of issues of who would choose to do what, I want to thank the government employees for being here and put on the record, especially with the Mayor's Council, I respect their council, that any decision I would make as a senator would be personal to me and would be my decision, and I will follow the administration's lead as saying that if I chose to forego any increases or the like, it would be on myself, because I support what's going on for the rest of the government and moving forward to ensure that we make whole our employees who work hard every day to serve this island. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Espicio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Morning, everyone. Thank you. I certainly appreciate, Shane and Director, your position that you want to make sure that the employees don't have a false expectation, and you want to make sure that whatever is adopted is what will be implemented. But I hope you can share our perspective. I share Senator Ben's perspective that it's this uncertainty that creates all this anxiety. And I think what I'm hearing you guys say is you want us to adopt the plan, whatever the plan is, whatever the plan looks like, and just leave it to you to implement it. But how do we guarantee to the employees that whatever we say we're going to do as a policy is exactly what the administration is going to implement? How do we trust but verify, as my colleagues just said, if we have nothing to verify?
Well, like what Shane had mentioned, that there is an appeals process, that if any employee doesn't feel that what they do was not adequately addressed in this increase, they can submit their concern, and they will go through the appeal process, and it will be addressed accordingly.
Can you, because I know, Benita, you weren't there in 2010 when Governor Camacho implemented the Hay study. We talked about it hasn't been, employees have been waiting for 20 years, but in 2010, the Hay study was implemented, but this governor suspended it. Can you share your experiences of how that plan was implemented in 2010? You weren't there, Benita,
Sorry,
so I'm going to ask Shane. That's why I said I'll ask Shane who was there. You can talk about your experiences and when it had to be suspended and what that was like. And I'll get to you, Shane.
Is there, and only because there was a lot going on at the time and it was very controversial, right? Is there a specific, and forgive me, right, it was 4 some odd years ago. Is there a specific, I guess, point in time or situation we're looking at? Because the overall tone when we did go ahead and implement the plan, then Governor Camacho instructed us to go ahead and move forward. He implemented it, and a lot of the problems that we did experienced more so were for the progressive steps that we were taking in the plan, the nature of what was being done. A lot of it was new. A lot of it was something that would basically change the landscape of what compensation looked like, at least in the agencies under the governor, and change how compensation was administered. Was it wrong? No. I mean, there was a lot of data to show that the trends that were going on at the time would prove that they worked. But did it fit the government of Guam at the time? Maybe not. And I'm talking about the hybrid scales, moving on ranges. People couldn't exactly see a quantifiable figure to, okay, so that's the next step I'm going to, make plans of whatever they need to make.
Would you say that there were a lot of pushback from the GovGuam employees at the time the plan was implemented in 2010?
There were on three basic levels. One basic level was associated with things that aren't understood. We did do a comprehensive rollout orientation for a lot of agencies, yes, I could talk all day about how pay scales work.
Well, we have all day. The employees are here.
No, and that's what I'm saying. Back in 2010, going through that orientation process, we did gain a lot of feedback. Our whole office took part in that, and we did gain a lot of feedback, trying to understand the principles behind movement of pay and everything. Some people, frankly, just didn't care. They just wanted to see how much they were going to make. Some people just, wanted to fully understand it, for which we sat down with them on a more intimate basis and tried to explain it. The other form of kickback we got, some
Pushback,
people,
not kickback. I hope you didn't get any kickback.
Okay. Pushback we got was basically they weren't happy with the amount. Okay, and it's a fact of any kind of compensation plan that you're going to put in anywhere. We talked about compression. A lot of people weren't happy with the amount that was given. We did it on a structural basis, which meant it wasn't a fact of picking out a certain employee or a certain position and saying, hey, you only get this much. It was, let's update the actual structure. Let's look at the pay grades to evaluate them for the size of job that they have, and that's how it was done to ensure that we maintain our mandates of having it consistent across the board. Pay is always a sensitive issue, and our office deals with it on a daily basis, whether it's they're doing more than what they should do and they should get paid for it, details or anything like that. We have a lot of experience with it. And then on the third level, just transitioning into something new, going into like 12-month waiting periods instead of the current. It was going through the education process and helping them understand, but that wouldn't have been done without the approval of the plan at the time.
Did you have any employees file an appeal?
No, as I stated earlier, what had happened was we were still in development of the process and looking
But
at
it was
how it could work.
implemented, though.
Yes, it was.
The Hayes study was implemented. People were getting their reclassifications. People were getting money increases in their salaries, and they were getting that income, and
Correct.
that was suspended. So
Correct.
when that was, but from the time they were getting this Hay plan implemented, and you received all these pushback on three bases that you pointed out, was there any employee at the time that you can recall ever submitted an appeal saying that they don't agree with how their position was reclassified and they don't agree with the salary?
We did get communications, like I said, we did get feedback from the employees. At the time, because the executive order rescinded the plan, it basically brought them back to where they were at prior to
but
the plan.
prior to the plan being rescinded, you had employees who were not happy with the Hay
Yes.
plan.
Yes, to answer your question.
And
yes.
your whole argument that you're making this morning is, senators, just trust us, just pass it. Employees will appeal, and we'll get to that. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But if
Right.
you are sharing your actual experience in 2010, where there was pushback on three different reasons, but yet there was no, to your recollection, there was no formal submission of an appeal?
No, and that's because the implementation was actually, we got the green light to go ahead and implement. We were in the process of creating the request for review. What was important, though, through that process was learning that we had to have that process ready. And so we were looking at it, we had to look at the historical historical context of how the appeals were done, and we also had to have conversations with the Civil Service Commission, talking about appellate authorities and jurisdictions on classification. We had to weed out to make sure that the statutes would be maintained in what they were doing. We didn't have time in 2010. The administration at the time said, go ahead and implement. It was, I believe, around Thanksgiving that they gave us the go-ahead, which meant, we didn't have time to put that process together, which is going back to why we wanted to issue the same pay grades so that people this time around, if they did have a certain appeal on the pay grade that they had back then, they could do it
But
now.
you want to issue the same pay grades as you wanted to issue the same pay grades in 2010?
Mhm.
And knowing all the pushback you had,
Mhm.
and for the last 4 years, there was no opportunity to address those concerns, and so we want to do more of the same.
Basically, on the governor's executive order to rescind the plan, that plan was taken out of consideration. When 3268 came out and repealed the section that authorized that plan, it basically repealed 2010 altogether. So when we looked at the actual appeal process, we thought it was fair that the same appeals that may have come from those pay grades being issued, then we want those to come.
So what
right
did you
back
do
around.
with the data that you did receive from those employees who registered their concern informally?
No
and
formal. No
I said
formal
informally.
Appeals?
No, I said
Yeah,
informally,
okay.
and so there was no effort to try to update the plan to address those classifications that you already know were in question. I know we're trying to do this so everybody can have a great Valentine's this year. But can you tell me what Valentine's will look like in 2015? We're gonna go from a nice Valentine's ball. Then next year we're gonna go to the sandcastle where they have that Valentine's event for singles.
I won't comment on the Valentine's ball because
No, but
not what
we're
we do, but
doing this.
what I'm gonna say is that the appeal process, and yes, we did think it was very appropriate to go ahead and release the same pay grades when we rescinded the plan.
Go ahead and read her
Via
note.
executive order in 2011. Everyone went back to the pay grades they had prior to implementation, and that is exactly what the executive order told us to do. Ergo, there were no impacts moving forward from January 31st from the plan. So when going through 2014, we wanted to make sure that we took the snapshot of what happened in 2010, brought it forward, so that employees did have that process of going through, and wanted to allow them to discuss with us their pay grades. So we believe that was the most appropriate way to go with it, and that's why we issued the 2010.
Do you think that classified employees will actually submit an appeal given the current climate of fear throughout this government?
I can't comment on the climate of fear, but yes, they have expressed to us they will avail of the process.
Okay, and just finally, quickly, Mr. Chairman, I share the same concern that the judiciary shares, that the legislature was never asked to be included in this HAY plan submitted by this administration. We did provide for the classified personnel only, or another scenario with classified and unclassified personnel. Director, you responded to the judiciary recognizing their authority and saying, I guess, the separation of recognizing their authority to administer their own merit program, but you cite that 3268 says that you have to do the classified personnel and then one with classified and unclassified personnel, but yet you also recognize that whatever is in the plan, the judiciary can decide whether or not they're going to implement it.
Senator, that's correct. I received that letter from the Chief Justice last night, and I responded to his letter this morning, and I provided a copy to this body. And you're correct that it's up to them to implement. We recognize the separation of powers.
But do you think
but
that's...
at that time, when we were doing this process, and it's also in the law, the Public Law 32-68 appropriated some funds and it asked for an implementable plan. So we did include the judiciary branch.
Yeah, but maybe you should have asked the judiciary to come up with their own recommendation, and then certainly the $7 million that was appropriated will be backed up by proportionally to what that share is. But if somebody is telling you you don't have the authority to do what you want to do. You can't say, well, I'm going to do it anyway, and then it's up to you.
Well, they, back in 4 years ago, it was, the judiciary was included in the request to do the study, and the judiciary provided documentations for DOA to review their personnel job description and the slotting of the employees' pay scale.
But
So we are just facilitating the process, and if they, if, you know, we recognize that they're a separate branch of government, and we respect that.
no, but that's fine because they were included in this process. Were they included in this process this time around?
We used information collected pursuant to 2952, which included the judiciary. So the documentation that we were talking about, the 4,000 plus documents, judiciary was included. In
But that
review.
was back then.
Yes, and
But in this process,
Mhm.
didn't you think it was as a common courtesy to go back to the judiciary and say we're thinking about moving forward on the Hay plan? Can you give your comments?
well, I know in their letter they did state that they were in support of the 2010 Hay plan, which consists of the same list of positions and pay grades for the judiciary that we issued in 2014. 3268 actually told us to use the information in 2952, and which was authorized by Executive Order 2006-21. So in answer to your question, they were included back then. The current statute told us to use that information. We made recommendations, and we do acknowledge that they can reassign pay grades. In 1991, actually, the process was the same. Pay grades were issued on a comprehensive level. The Judicial Council met to decide whether or not they would adopt and amend it. And since then, they've been going with their statute and administering their pay plan. So in essence, to comply with all the laws, they do work together, we believe. And so these are purely recommendations for the Judicial Council to consider. They can very well not take them, which we would be, very cooperative with.
But
And if they
but
do,
if we adopt it in law, then it's kind of putting the judiciary in a position where they might have to file an injunction in the courts to nullify that law.
well, and that interpretation can be taken, and in our response back to the judiciary, we did basically say we think it can work together, and I believe my director is still waiting for any kind of response from the judiciary. But yeah, and just as an overall process, historically we saw that worked. 2952 was clear that it was to include the judiciary, and that's what we studied. They gave us basically almost all of their job descriptions, which we had committees review, and we made recommendations on the pay grades for that. So technically, that's where we stood with that, and we wanted to just
Okay,
go ahead and go back to that.
thank you so much for your responses, both of you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We have $7 million appropriated to basically take care of pay increases for the remaining 7 months, I guess, in this fiscal year. Now, you mentioned something earlier, Mrs. Manglonia, that basically you have determined the cost that it will take for each department to implement this increase. And we know that for the entire year, it's going to cost about $20 million. So I guess, you can extrapolate from that, and we know that if we were to fully implement the pay plan for the balance of this fiscal year, we would need about $15 million right now, approximately. So does DOA have a plan when we implement this to make sure that we make this $7 million go as far as it can get, such that the lion's share of it is not taken by those in the upper echelon that may be looking at a $20,000 increase or whatever, whereas you may have some entry-level positions that to bring them up to the target maybe just a $5,000 increase, and that will take care of them for the balance of the year. So how does DOA have some kind of a plan to make sure that I guess it was something like when they had the COLA, and they had just the small percentage that would have taken the lion's share if we were going to give them everything that was coming to them, but then the majority who really just had, a small amount coming to them, basically got just a proportionally smaller amount. So how's that going to be accomplished?
Well, that's why we had proposed to, give the nurses first like 100% of the increase, because they're a smaller group, and it's much more manageable, and it's based on the cash that comes in, the peaks and valleys. So that's why we projected with the cash that this is how we're going to phase it in, and this is how it's going to work based on what the appropriation level that we received.
So based on that, then I understand that response to mean then that there may be some groups who would be able to be given the full pay increase so that they meet their target, and then we may have people like maybe at the custodian level or the solid waste technicians who will not come close to that target because there's just not enough money to go around.
Well, it will be proportionate to what the increase is going to be, and then we will assess our cash. We monitor the cash, we monitor the revenue on a monthly basis, and if we see that there's going to be more, we're anticipating more collections, then we definitely will not hesitate to adjust the plan and move it forward earlier than August.
Senator Yamashita.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker. Thank you, Madam Director, and Shane, congratulations on being promoted to HR Administrator. I certainly appreciate the competence and the confidence that you bring to that position. It is indeed very critical. I think we've already, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, I think we've already reiterated the importance for communication and collaboration. I think we've already stated that there perhaps are frequently asked questions that we want to get out and have everyone understand and appreciate, and certainly us, so that we can support you and so that we can help, right, in this whole process. I remember being part of the Hay study in the 90s, and I remember the fallout there. It just so happened that my position was higher than the other associates, and it was a problem. But I understand the process, and I understand the integrity of the process, and so I appreciate that. So I don't question that. But I think maybe just getting the word out and fostering that communication would be helpful to all of us. There was a question, outside of, who has jurisdiction, the AG's office, the judicial office, and I think you answered that question. So I'm not going to talk about that again, but that has been raised. The question of federal employees. Have we looked at how this is going to impact our federal employees' counterparts? Is there an impact, and what is that dollar amount? And if you haven't really thought about it, I think that's something that some of our presidents, for sure, at GCC is concerned about. She doesn't think it's going to be a real big concern for Guam Community College, but it might be for certain programs, right, as we phase in this. And then, Shane, I'm wondering, as we talk about pay, and it may not really be a part of the Hay plan, but as we continue our work, because I understand you meet regularly with all the human resource administrators or managers, the idea of performance, of accountability, and training, I really think that's really, really important. For the most part, I trust directors in knowing what their employees are doing, but I don't always trust them to know how to ensure they get the training, the employees get the training that they need in order to perform. I certainly know the Department of Education, it's always been a real big concern of mine. How can I expect all the teachers to work with all kids, to include those with special needs, when they've never been provided the training? So I would hope that as you continue your meetings, your conversations, that the accountability piece of performance and of training needs to be there. And most certainly that whole process of, if you're not cutting it, and then what? The consequences, right? And you made a statement earlier that, you're working with different boards. Certainly the Department of Education has a Board of Education that is in charge of that. And so I hope that we have those communication pieces in place. So that's what I wanted to say. And I do want to say that I do appreciate the investment of human capital. I think every one of us understands the importance of what we're investing here and how the people do make the difference, and all of us will make the difference. And so, the federal employee piece, you can get back to me later on that, but I think that is critical. But the training training part and the accountability, we're going to invest in our people. Certainly, those standards need to be met. How are you performing to these particular standards? Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. Senator Rodriguez.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I could just interrupt for a minute. I just want to clarify a statement made by Shane with regards to the judiciary. The 2010 classification position listing did not include judiciary employee positions. The 2014 does. That's the difference. And I think maybe that's where the Chief Justice is coming from, where the 2010, although you reviewed it and reviewed your documents and assisted them and worked with them, when you came out with the final classification listing, it did not include court positions, but the 2014 does.
And we'll deal with the judiciary. They'll be called next. Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker. Thank you, Shane and Benita, for being here, for all the GovGuam employees. I think a lot of the issues that I had were already asked, and I know there's pending some information that you bring back to the committee. Some of the concerns I'd like to share with you is concerns from employees that have called in and spoke to me about them bringing some of these concerns already to the HR department, even prior to your time as the HR administrator. But these weren't taken into consideration in this 2014 proposal. And so when we talk about, I know you said there's going to be a process, a request for review process. I think is very important. And I don't know if that was asked, that we see what that process is going to be, because if they're not being heard now before this is implemented, and it's not it wasn't taken into consideration with this 2014 proposal, then it's very hard to assure them, to assure the government employees that during that time their concerns will be heard, right? And so the other difference I see too with the 2014 and the 2010 submission is that in 2010 the plan had a category where it says this is the current pay grade, and then this is the new pay plan, right? But this time around, it just shows you what the pay plan would be with the title. And so I think that's one very simple thing that could be done to change, and that it's simple that our employees will be able to see where they stand. And so, is that something that you can do, pretty quickly?
Thank you, Senator. I definitely will discuss both of those issues with Benita, and I'm sure she'll reply to that. But yeah, I do understand your concern at that point.
Okay.
And I'll discuss it with.
Okay, and so now, can you acknowledge that you did receive some concerns already prior to issuing this 2014 plan?
Yes, and there were a lot of the same concerns that we got in 2010, and you're right. We didn't have the vehicle to go ahead and review them. And thank you, Senator, for bringing it up again, because a lot of the concerns that do come up, it's a culmination of either the pay grades that were proposed in 2010, and a lot of it, what gets mixed up is the actual issues that may go on in departments regarding classification and work that's being done. So sorting through that process is on a daily basis is what we've been doing since 2010, and actually creating this process for them to go through specific for the study is what we plan to do, and I'll definitely discuss it with the director.
So are you I know that the general call is don't change it, this is the way it's going to be, and then if there's any changes later on, we'll deal with it then, right? But is that really, are you guys open now to make any of these changes if it's really brought up forward to you that I know I don't want to say the exact positions that were brought to my attention, but where there's a big disparity in terms of what the 2010 proposal was. Are you open to that?
We can definitely receive them, and we'd have to work out at that point how those submissions work with the process once everything's finalized. But there's nothing stopping an employee from coming in and filing something, and that usually happens. And then we'll sit down and figure out, okay, once it's filed, we definitely have to have this group set aside. So once the process is in, they can consider it filed, and that whole process, of course, I'll discuss with the director. And we have no problems with it. We know that people have concerns, and we are open to taking them. My staff on a daily basis come up to me and say, man, Shane, I talk to them and say, yeah, I do feel for them, and we are moving forward. We got to make sure that the due process that is given to them is consistent with the manner and how we've done it before. Giving them that voice, and we do understand that there are concerns, and we're willing to talk to them about it, but we have to have a structure to do it. Otherwise, we'll be inundated for the next 3 years trying to figure out, different policy issues within every department, and we want to avoid cluttering this process with other processes that they have administrative means to handle. So yes, definitely.
Okay, so you would provide us well, you said you'll talk to the director, right, and provide us that request and showing, really simply what the
She'll be
game plan is
instructed
and
to
what
do it by the
proposal-
committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker.
Senator Frank, we're going by Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker, and Benita and Shane, thank you for making yourselves available and responding to some of the key questions coming from members of this body. When the plan was initially submitted to the legislature, there's a particular phrase that I had applied towards the implementation process. And I used the term financially misguided and questioned the sustainability of this. And that is directly out of the Hay Plan that was adopted in 2010. And the verbiage reads, "It is important to get a pragmatic balance between implementing salary plans that are aligned with the government's compensation philosophy and affordability. Such a pragmatic balance may mean a multi-year implementation plan may need to be adopted." And that's really where the perspective is with regards to looking at the Hay Plan. First and foremost, we know after 20 years, our classified and certain classification employees, to include unclassified employees, deserve a raise. There's no question there. And that's the direction that I believe you're going to find every single member of this body moving towards, with very few exceptions. Now, the question is affordability. And when we're talking about $7 million allocated and the full implementation of certain classification positions, and then 50% implementation up until August, with the $7 million, it brings into question the affordability component. Because if the projected cost right now is $20 million per year, and that's just the payment for our employees, our public employees, then that annualized component based on conservative benefits that the government has to absorb, the total cost on an annualized basis is about $27 million every single year after September 30th of this fiscal year. So I think it's good to hear that at least you and BBMR and the chief executive have stepped forward and have said that based on a phased-in implementation, that it's affordable. Now, how the budget is submitted in terms of identifying it in the fiscal year 15, the additional $27 million that will be required, because this is an operational expense. It is an expense that we need to give our employees their pay raises, but in the same token, Benita, you know as one of the key financial representatives of the government of Guam, that $27 million every single year past September 30th this year certainly is a huge chunk of money in terms of commitment. So that's one of the reasons why that phrase was used as one of my statements, because it all comes down to some of the line of questions. It's not a question of, or at least from my perspective, I'm not going to question the experts and the Hay group and the methodology that they applied, because I know in certain instances they went in, they took a look at the position descriptions, they identified the employees, and they outlined exactly what the compensation should be. And that is not where I come in. I come in as a member of this body looking at the affordability component and assuring our public employees that after September 30th, in addition to the $7 million that would be utilized for this fiscal year, that your government, based on the decision of the members of this body, will have to identify $27 million so that you can keep your pay raise, because it's not something that's going to be implemented between now and September, and then after either November or December of next year, we're going to have to implement some serious cost adjustment measures. I guess one of the questions I have, Benita, please, if you can respond to this, is listening very intently to one of your statements. You said, paraphrasing, agencies with their budget will need to incorporate into their plan. Now, we just discussed very briefly the judiciary. They have their separate allocation for the fiscal year. Department of Education has a separate allocation. We know, we have read the headlines that they need the additional resources to be able to meet their expenditure requirement for this fiscal year. So based on that statement that was made a little earlier during the discussion, is it your position that in fact DOE would have to absorb the additional costs of implementing the HAY plan? That the judiciary is going to have to absorb the additional costs within their budget that was allocated by the legislature? Or will the $7 million be sufficient to address the executive branch agencies and some of these individualized agencies that have their separate budgets? I mean, because the University of Guam and Guam Community College is also part of that entire equation. So will you be able to, are you able to respond to that now, or?
Well, I could respond partially now. They, like Wada has stated earlier, that they would have to live within what they're allotted, and that's one of the reasons why we have that reserve, at the beginning of the fiscal year, because that's how we manage our expenditures. And with the addition, with this allotment, I mean, an appropriation of $7 million that allowed us to implement the HAY plan moving forward. And you're talking about 2010 when the HAY was approved, and whether it's sustainable now. Well, in 2010, I wasn't around, but I was here at the beginning of 2011, and we were facing hundreds of millions of deficit and over 300 millions of unpaid tax refunds, and we were looking at payables that have not been paid in over a year, and that's one of the reasons why we suspended the HAY plan. And this is to answer also Senator Rory's question about what was my experience. And when we came in with this administration, we had a plan, and the plan was to stabilize this government. And you have seen in 2012 we have the surplus, and you have seen that we have been paying down all the liabilities of this government, and we are on target with our tax refunds, and we have paid down the payables. We have brought down the number of days that a vendor would have to wait for their payment, and we see more business people wanting to do business with the government because they're getting paid sooner. And if we have other concerns of vendors that come in and need their check because they're struggling, we make sure that we assist them. And I think this is a good time now to move forward and implement this plan. And it was in the public law that we have to submit an implementable plan, and our plan is a phased-in approach, and this is how we can sustain it this fiscal year. And I know that once the 2015 plan budget submission is submitted, it will be addressed in that submission.
Okay, I just wanted to thank you very much for your response, and I recognize all the activities that have taken place over the course of the last several years in terms of trying to right-size the financial situation of the position of the government of Guam. I don't think that that's in question here, because obviously we as a community, since 2009, July to 2009, this government has had to go to the bond market and borrow in excess of $740 million. That's 2009. So that's 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 5 years. This community, this government went out and borrowed over $740 million to take care of obligations. So right-sizing the government financially, I think, is an excellent move, moving in that direction. And that's one of the reasons why I threw out that number in terms of affordability, because based on your statements, yes, it's phased in. It's an excellent approach in terms of assuring our public employees, classified and unclassified, that you would get your pay raise either February 14, 50% or 100%, and in August, the remaining balance. And I wanted to make sure that based on your statements and the review of the finances and some of the ongoing activities, that $27 million will be identified in subsequent fiscal years so that in fact we can continue this pay raise, because this is something that not only Shane has mentioned and you have alluded to, 20 years where in fact our public employees have not received the pay raise, and they absolutely deserve it. But they also need to know, and get that assurance from members of this body and also from the chief executive that it's affordable and sustainable, being able to carry it forward. And based on the general comments and the responses that have been provided, I would like to see, based on the oversight, what the numbers and sequence are going to be, how it's going to be allocated, only because obviously $27 million is a lot of money, but making that statement that agencies with their budget will need to incorporate into their plan, I know for a fact that the judiciary, in implementing their law enforcement adjustment, the additional 20%, approached the front office and asked for consideration to get the resources transferred over to the judiciary. Unfortunately, that route did not work, so now they have rerouted themselves and have come to this body asking for some additional financial infusion to take care of that obligation. So that's one of the reasons why, in terms of applying equity and making sure that once this is implemented, that it applies across the board to all public employees, and that the judiciary, Department of Education, UOG, GCC, and some of these other entities that have separate budgets can be assured that they will receive the resources equitably applied across the board, so that in fact our public employees will get what they deserve. So thank you very much again, Benita and Shane, for your responses this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Limtiaco.
Thank you, Vice Speaker.
Just so everybody understands, I'm doing this alphabetically by seniority. So,
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Many of the questions have been asked by my colleagues and answered as well. I don't have any further questions on the recommendations of the Government of Guam Competitive Wage Act. I have formally requested information from Director Manglotny on one specific item as it relates to the methodology on senatorial pay. She has committed to responding, and so I do not have any further questions. Thank you.
thank you. Senator McCready.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak here today. You know, and one of the good things about going second to last is finding out what everyone heard or everyone's talking about, and finding out some of the information and the recommendations that were given to you guys. I think the way I look at it is we're all public servants here. We all work for the same government. We have to work together as a team. And we have to do that with compromise and common sense. And when you talk about a government employee getting a pay raise or having gotten a pay raise since 20 years, I mean, talk about some of the mayors here that's been working at mayor's offices that haven't received a pay raise in over 20 years. That would have been a good time to start this. And I guess the second best time would be now. You know, because what's going to happen in 20 years from now? Are we going to still have this problem? I don't think we should hold it against any government employee just because they want to help sustain their island or make it better. And if you look at the last 20 years, there's not one person up here that can't say that the government services hasn't gotten better. You know, so I'm happy that we finally identified and we're implementing some of the recommendations made by this Hay study. If we do not take care of our government officials or our government employees, somebody else will. And we are going to lose good employees with great institutional knowledge that we can otherwise keep. And hopefully one day we can pass that leadership along and uncover potentials of other individuals who want to work for this government. And I think it's at the utmost of importance that we as a government, whether you're employee, classified, unclassified, or elected, you go to work with a sense of pride and dignity. You look yourself in the mirror knowing that success only comes before work in the dictionary, and you get better every day. And I think you should be compensated at a market value for that. You know, I know that this body fights for their pay, you know, and I know that you guys weren't involved in any type of pay raise for this body in 2010 or the Hay recommendations. So we took care of ourselves. I think it's time to look after you guys. And I'm not trying to knock anyone here. I'm just saying the reality of this situation is if we're going to look after our body or our branch of government, then we ought to look after the government as a whole. and the employees as a whole. That's our job. We pay the bills of this employee of this government. That's what we do. That's our main focus. And I think to question the integrity and the transparency of you guys, and I didn't hear that today. I heard some of a team approach just to trust but verify. I commend Department of Administration for knowing the heat you're going to take, and for being transparent, and for showing up here and answering all these questions. I commend you guys, and I thank you. This isn't something that you want to get criticized for. You know, this is something that I think we deserve to give the employees of Guam. And so it's not a bad thing. I just had one question, though, and this is a very, very, very broad question because of the perception. This isn't a bill. This isn't something that the legislature needs to pass. This is something that's going to get implemented because of the 30-day time constraint that it was sent down to us to either approve or amend. And I just want to say, if there's any amendments proffered in a bill form, would that make the process more cumbersome and delay that sunset of the 14th of February? Do you understand the question?
Yes, I
Okay.
understand. We would prefer that this what we have submitted, the plan that we submitted, be adopted, or within 30
With
days.
no amendments.
With no amendments.
That's coming from the Department of Administration's recommendations. You
Yeah,
don't
that's
want
what we
you
submitted.
want this to go through the process and on the 14th implemented with no amendments from the legislature.
That's correct. We're ready to implement it.
Okay. Well, I wanted to make sure that was public because I do believe that you're the experts, and we should be taking some expertise from you. I'm asking for it to make a better educated decision. And so if you're saying that you have seen everything and you have seen all these recommendations, you followed whatever recommendations that they recommended in the Hayes study, and we're in a better financial position to implement this today than we were in 2010, and you're asking the legislature to not get in the way, rather let this go through because it is implementable and we can sustain it. That's what you're saying.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt, but I thought I asked earlier if you were open to making some changes before we adopt it, right? And the answer was yes. Just want to stand corrected here.
Oh, sorry, Senator. I thought, and this is just me. I thought the question was, are we open to receive from employees? That was what I understood. From employees, any concerns versus the pay grades, the appeal process. That's what I thought.
No, I think my
Okay.
question was
So-
because I know employees were submitting already,
And-
but it wasn't taken into consideration. So I'm asking
Okay.
whether you're open
Mhm.
to still make some changes, after you receiving these things now before we adopt it, and the answer was yes.
My apologies. I thought it was in reference to the pay grades and the appeal process. So to that question, I would defer to the director.
Yeah, we recognize that there are some employees that are not happy with what the pay scales be, and that's the reason why we have the appeal process, and we expect that appeal process to move forward, and as soon as we have any appeals from the employees, we will act on it as expeditiously as we can.
Okay, so I guess for me, it's just that if you see something in front of you, and you would agree that perhaps there's a disparity there, that I think it's better if we make that change before it's adopted. I think it's just a better way to operate, but that's just me. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I get all these questions that I want to ask, it just gets really hard to just sit and wait. And I appreciate all the questions from my colleagues, and I appreciate Department of Administration being here. I'm really trying to get a handle on what the messaging is coming from DOA. because just several weeks ago, we had a hearing, and the message was we need to hold funds in reserve in education, health, and public safety because we don't know if the money's going to be there throughout the fiscal year. And now the message from DOA is not only should we spend $7 million more for these increases, but we should spend $8 million on top of that, and don't worry, the money's going to be there. And so now I'm trying to understand, is the money going to be there or isn't it? Because we don't want to say to the people, all of these employees who deserve their increase, we don't want to say, you're going to get it, and then all of a sudden say, oh, but also those increases, we're going to have to hold those in reserve too because we came up short. So what's the deal here? Are we going to have the money for these increases or not?
I handle the cash. The allotments come from BBMR, and our revenue is tracking. I am certain that this is sustainable, and we can implement this now.
So we're going to have the money there for these increases.
Yes.
Okay. So then my other question then is, why are we holding money in reserve then in education, health, and public safety? Why are we starving education, starving health, and starving public safety right now, withholding all of these agency budgets if money's going to be there?
That is a the management tool that we have implemented.
But why are we managing it that way if if we already know the money's going to be there?
Well, there are sometimes like for example in FY 2013, the TFF didn't come in.
So we're holding in reserve. We're threatening to shut off the aircon to our kids and freezing hiring and education because of this reserve, because we don't know if the money's going to be there for that. But let's go ahead, just pass this and trust us because the money's going to be there for this. That's what you're saying?
No, what's going on? What you're alluding to is in 13, there was no reserve. At the end, everything was reserved. Was released for DOE.
So DOE has its full allotment for 2014?
2013, they were given the full allotment.
No, for this fiscal year. Do they have their full allotment for this fiscal year?
They are being given. You asked that question to BBMR, but whenever I receive the allotment for DOE, I release the cash that is released accordingly.
So has DOE received all of their allotment for this fiscal year?
We have given them their cash allotment.
So they are at 100% right now. They're not waiting for 2014
money.
money.
No, I am saying that whatever was released from BBMR, I have released to
So what I'm trying to get at is, why is the governor pushing us into this direction and creating all of these expectations for people when in the same token, for our school system and for our healthcare system and for our public safety system, we're still withholding money from them and we're not giving them their full allotments? If the money's going to be there for this, then the money should be there right now for that.
We work closely with DOE and we give them the cash that is needed based on the allotment that is released to them.
But it's just not making sense to me. If we know, if you're saying that the $7 million we appropriated for this increase is not enough for the full 15, as Senator Ada clarified, and we need $8 million more, and you're saying that means $8 million more is going to be there, don't worry, then why are we worrying for education, health, and public safety? Why are we withholding money from that right now?
Like I had mentioned, this is a management that this fiscal policy has instituted to manage the cash. We're in the first quarter of the fiscal year, and we assess their needs. We meet regularly with DOE, and if the allotment reserve needs to be bumped up, then it gets released.
But from what I remember in our last hearing, Benita, in the discussion of the DOE allotment, at the end of the first quarter of this fiscal year, they were still withheld $5 million. So they were at least short $5 million for the first 3 months of this year. Why are we shorting them on one end and then turning around and making all these promises to people that we might not be able to keep? And if you're saying we absolutely can keep it, then why aren't we absolutely fully funding education, health, and public safety?
Well, like I said, that's how we manage the cash. That's how we manage the resources of this government.
So you're gonna starve education, health, and public safety today, and you're gonna make all these promises to people for their pay on the other side.
To date, we have given education $60 million.
But not their full appropriation.
If you go back and allocate what that is on a monthly basis, they are receiving their allotment.
They're receiving their full 100% allotment as of today.
I'm saying they are receiving the cash that has been, the cash based on the allotment that has been release. BBMR and DOE work on their allotments.
But every dollar, and see, that's where it's just I'm having the hardest time here, because we're making these promises to people for their pay, but we're withholding money from all these other places, and we're starving our own kids. We're going to make them sweat. We're going to make them sweat in a hot classroom because we're going to turn off 50% of the air conditioning because there's no money to give DOE right now. But you're saying you're going to have $8 million more later on for all of these people who are having their expectations raised?
I think you're getting it wrong. DOE is getting their full operational needs.
But that's not what they're saying.
I can't help it if the identified source for DOE is TFF and it didn't come in.
The governor can transfer money.
In 13,
the governor has a 15% transfer authority. If he wants to
so
manage the cash, he can. So why are we having this kind of situation
DOE got
now?
100% of their allotment from the general fund. I cannot release anything that I don't have authority for.
Can we swear you in and have you state that sworn in that DOE as of today has received 100% of their allotment from the general fund?
With all due respect, Senator, this is an informational hearing, and we're talking about the
That's
pay
true.
implementation, and you're
That's
trying
true.
to make it difficult.
Oh no, I'm not trying to make anything difficult. I'm just trying to really understand this because this is our people's money, and it's not really adding up for me. And my other question, Mr. Chairman, and this will be my last question, is the governor's saying don't make any amendments. He's saying if we make any kind of amendments to this thing, we're going to ruin it for everybody. But when I think about it, unemployment is up, crime is up, healthcare costs are up, our debt is through the roof. And the governor wants to give himself, the lieutenant governor, and all of his managers a pay raise. And so for me, as a policymaker, I sit back and I say to myself, when the quality of life of our people is suffering, when all of those things are going up, when power bills are going up, when the cost of living here is going up, when wages aren't keeping up with all of that, why are we going to give a raise to our managers? Why are we going to give a raise to our governor? Our role here is to make sure that the quality of life of our people is improving. So why are we going to be giving our managers a raise?
This again goes back to the review process that went through that was conducted by the HR experts, and they went through all the different jurisdictions of what the pay is, and which includes all the unclassified positions. But it's your decision if you want to remove the elected leaders. That's your prerogative. But it is just a recommendation. It's a plan that we submitted that DOA worked on. So you're perfectly free to do whatever on the elected positions.
I'm just really having a difficult time with the messaging that's being put out there because for myself, I support paying our unclassified and classified employees what they deserve. But I also believe that not only should we be fair to those employees, we should be fair to our people. And we shouldn't be giving raises out to management or to the governor or to the lieutenant governor or to any senators if the quality of life of our people is not improving. And so the governor's pigeonholing this thing, trying to piggyback his manager's salaries and his own salary onto all of these employee salaries. And he's saying if you do anything to it, you're going to ruin it. And for me, I'm committed to not only making the amendment to take out senators, but to also address the quality of life issues that I just talked about. But then what's going to be the consequences? The governor going to come back and then say, oh, you touched the manager's pay and now I'm going to punish all the other employees to teach everybody a lesson? Is that the direction that we're going to go in if we make any kind of changes to this?
No, you're alluding that the governor is piggybacking and giving himself a raise. The governor has even announced that he's not going to accept the raise.
Till next year.
And then when you're talking about
Till next year after the election.
You're talking about the salary increase for the employees for the unclassifieds. The senators gave themselves a raise 2 years ago, or when back in 2010.
Well, Benita, when you
that
talk
was-
about 2010, you always said you weren't there. I wasn't here
No,
either.
no,
but I am
no,
talking
no,
about
no,
2014.
We were the ones. I mean, this administration was the one that released the cash for that. 2011.
Why is the governor putting off this increase until after the election?
You know what? When you were here in 2011, when the governor didn't even cut his salary by 10%, and even his senior staff, and he's saying
He's restored all of that already, though, right?
Well, because we paid.
He
the
restored
tax
all of that
refunds.
before implementing this Hay study. He restored all of his pay
He
for.
restored because his message was until the tax refunds are paid, and we have paid the tax refunds.
So he restored his pay, his director's pay, but he left out all these guys that have been waiting since 2010.
No, you're getting it wrong. He cut his salary by 10%, and he just restored it to what it's supposed to be.
He restored his to what it's supposed to be, but these guys have supposed to have had a salary increase since 2010, and he had, by executive order, taken that away, and he still hasn't restored that.
That's what we're trying to do now. Because
Yes, he's trying to do that
plan,
now.
Our plan then was to right-size this government, and that's exactly what we have done for the last 3 years. And that's why we're here before you, encouraging you to just accept the plan that we submitted. So on February 14th, we can implement. We're ready to implement the plan.
I support it for the unclassifieds and for the classifieds, but I don't believe that leadership should be getting any kind of pay increase until the quality of life of our people improves. And so that means that there's going to be an amendment to this thing. And I want it to be clear on the record that as this amendment comes forward, we're not doing it to derail anybody else, and I don't want the message to get lost in that. You know, we have to set standards and expectations for our leadership, and we have to deliver on our commitments to improve the quality of life of our people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the bright side, I just want to make it clear. Benita, the question I know, just to follow up on that, there's BBMR allotment schedules. I think the key is allotment schedule, right?
That's correct.
And those schedules are being followed, right?
That's correct.
Accordingly. So more than likely, those allotments will get to all sectors of government.
That's correct.
Thank you.
But the budget is not being released. What was budgeted for DOE is not being released.
Well, that's for BBMR to respond to. I handle the cash, and I release whatever is I have authority to release.
Okay. So thank you for answering that. I want to say that as a senator, that it's not my role to attack anybody's position. I don't think that I'm here to attack anybody's position, to include the governor, okay? And I also want to thank the governor and the administration for their leadership in putting this HAY plan together. This is a very tough measure to put together. It's very sensitive when we're touching anybody's salary, so I understand that. I have no questions. I just echo the sentiments of my colleagues, as though I have personal reservations with my own salary, as publicly stated. I want to make it very clear that I thank the administration for being very inclusive, including all local branches of government, to include unclassified employees at the management level, at the mid-management level, supervisors, employees on. So thank you for being very inclusive and looking at all ends and sectors of the government. And to sound like we are segregating unclassed and classified employees is somewhere we don't want to go in this government. This is truly one government, unclassed or classified. So I like to hope that we will proceed in a manner that we can work together expediently, working with the administration, and move this plan forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, as always, I'm the bad guy. Because I'm not going to sugarcoat it, because I've been listening very intently to the comments that you've been making. You've admitted that you received 4,000 comments in the 2010, or issues with the 2010 plan. And, well, he's personally, is that correct?
We received over 4,000 position descriptions. Those weren't appeals. Those were tax review pay grades.
And in all of a number of the senators asked whether or not you would be amenable to making any changes. My concern is that you've heard the employees that complained in 2010 and 2011 about the plan, but you completely ignored them because there were no changes made to you said the same thing that was in 2010 is now in 2014. On the question of the judiciary, you said, well, we took whatever they sent to us in 2010. We didn't invite them back in 2013 or 2014 to participate in this, and we're doing this. And your statement was, we know, and we are moving forward.
Can I clarify, Senator?
Yes.
And as respectfully as possible, to insinuate that my staff ignore complaints that come through is erroneous. What comes through is when the plan was rescinded, it rescinded in essence the review process that we would have put in place prior to that plan. Outside of that review process and the structure of a compensation study, on a daily basis, we review requests coming in to reassign pay grades. Some of our HR brothers, just like at UOG, they always ask us for help to deal with classification issues. Classification in and of itself of pay grades is a complex process that takes a lot of research. That in and of itself, we don't ignore, Senator. On a daily basis, we handle that within the line agencies. And if we can, when requests do come in from the autonomous agencies, try to assist them as well. We don't ignore the complaints that came in for 2010. What had happened is we actually set up an email address, and they were being received. Unfortunately, when the server crashed, we lost those emails, Senator. We don't ignore them. We didn't have the vehicle through the study, just for the study. We didn't have the vehicle once it was rescinded to address them. On a daily basis, though, we address them. And, outside of the study and everything that's done, classification issues are rampant in all branches of government. When other agencies call us for help, we try to lend our expertise toward that way. We never turn it down. My staff is very in tune with the different issues that come up when it deals with classification. We did receive extensive training when Hay was here for the Hay method, which numerous statutes tell us to use when determining the classification. So just to clarify, we didn't ignore any complaints. We are open to hearing them. Right now, people do call in, and our staff is trained to handle the question. We just take it as it comes, Senator, and we did not ignore any complaints.
I'm not saying so much just ignore, but it was, we know, your words exactly. We know we are moving forward.
And we do not, and like I said, Senator, we just didn't have the vehicle to address it in the process linked to the study.
Right.
On a day-to-day, we do address it, though, Senator.
Benita, the chairman of Appropriations, has a whole series of questions that he's asked for you. Senator Rodriguez has asked for the comparison. I've asked for some. By Thursday, we expect responses to that. And at this point, I'm making the 5-day notice that we will have a hearing on next Friday at noon, in the event that there is a bill that we may introduce. I thank the two of you for the coming this morning, and we have the third branch of government, we have the fourth branch of government, and then I will hear any employee that wishes to be heard. Thank you.
Chairman, can I just make one more statement? I'm sorry, before we...
If I could just ask one question. Shane, when you say you're going to implement this plan, in the procedures and guidelines, for example, you had an implementation step. A one-step adjustment after initial slotting shall be granted in appropriate category as identified below. At minimum, no adjustment for those incumbents who receive equal or more than 3.8% increase upon initial slotting. Example, employee A and so forth. B, between steps 2 to 6, all incumbents shall move to the next higher step after initial slotting if increase is less than 3%. Are these the same things you're going to be doing, or you have done in looking at slotting this so that you can determine what the cost is going to be and what the allocation of the budget is going to be? Is this the same thing? Is this going to be applied?
Not the exact.
So what's going to change here?
Well, it depends on what's approved as far as the scales.
But how does the 3.8% differ from the scale? How does a one-step differ from the scale? How does that? Why would that change depending on the Hay plan?
Well, it would change based on the actual scales that are in there. Again, I go back to what was proposed in 2010. You were looking at hybrid scales versus what we have today.
But we're talking about at the minimum. We're talking at the bottom. The hybrid scales are all at the top end.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So for an employee at minimum, what does it mean to him? Is this going to be what's going to happen? Is there going to be a 3.8% increase?
You have to look at exactly what a 3.8% increase was for, Senator.
I know, that's what it says in here.
Yes, it was to address compression.
Right.
And so what we're looking at is in the general pay plan especially.
So there's nothing here?
I'm sorry?
So there's going to be no 3.8%?
At this point, unless the plan is approved, I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
But in what you submitted, does it contemplate a 3.8%? In the pay scale?
It may.
how's the employee going to know?
It really depends on what's approved, Senator. Senator,
Yes, but how do we know that if we approve that, that's what's going to be the result?
Yeah.
What is the result of approving this plan in this policies and procedures?
Yeah,
Can you tell
everything's
us that?
integrated, Senator. So, my answer to the question is, if anything does change as far as these structures, then it would have to see some sort of amendment in the policies and procedures, and that's just current principle.
We
and
don't know what
practice
those policies and procedures are at this time.
That's correct. It wasn't submitted here.
Can you submit?
It won't be approved. It won't be approved. We won't have the authority to do it without the plan getting approved.
Committee will ask that it be submitted in draft form.
Yes, submit the draft.
Sorry. I was going to make one more statement. And just for the benefit of my staff and the department as a whole, we do thank you guys for moving forward with this. It's been a very taxing thing to do, and we know the governor supported it for all the employees. But I would like to thank my staff for all the work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I understand the judiciary is here, Mr. Tenoyo, and whoever is here with you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Josh Tenorio. I'm the acting court administrator, and to my left is Barbara Jean Perez. She is our human resources administrator, and to her left is Attorney Di Manglotnia, who's the acting staff attorney. I know that the committee is in receipt, and the speaker is in receipt of correspondence between the Chief Justice, Robert Torres, and the Director of Administration regarding the inclusion of judiciary positions in the submission of the implementation plan. And the judiciary disagrees with the inclusion of the positions. We believe that these positions should be omitted from the plan. If this plan is adopted without any amendment, there is a reasonable question whether or not the Judicial Council's authority to set classification and compensation for its employees will be intact when the legislature is with the full effect of the law has adopted a plan submitted by the governor pursuant to the statute. We do have questions or concerns, actually disagreements with the pay grades that have been assigned. I know the director has communicated in her correspondence that the Department of Administration recognizes the authority of the Judicial Council to set and assign pay grades. However, if it's left in the plan that is adopted by the legislature, I think there are going to be some questions as to whether or not that authority would reasonably continue uninterrupted. There was mention about position descriptions, and I guess maybe just a little recap of the process in 2010. Although I was employed at this branch at that time, my understanding is that position descriptions were sent as they were requested from all of the other entities of the government of Guam. We did have some personnel that were trained in the Hay, but because of the approach that was instituted, our employees were excluded from all of the review and consideration of the judiciary positions at that time. So, as an example, the compiler of laws, who's here with us, Attorney Jerry Cepeda, her job is going to be downgraded to letter grade P as recommended by the executive branch, when we know that there are administrators of divisions within departments that are being assigned a grade of T, a pay grade of T. So I think that one of the observations is perhaps when you have a group of professionals that are reviewing these kinds of things, I think one thing that needs to be included in that discussion is analyzing the importance or the purpose of the job that is being discussed. So obviously the compiler of laws and attorney is responsible for compiling and publishing. Another is a statutory official of this government, and I would argue that as an example, that power and that authority and that responsibility is definitely an immense power, perhaps as compared to operating a division of an agency. I think not to discredit or disregard those kinds of important jobs, but context, I think, is important in that process. I informed the chairman, the vice speaker, that in 2010, the National Center of State Courts undertook an extensive compensation and pay grade study in the courts. They issued a report. He asked me whether or not the judiciary implemented it, and at that time, what was on the table was a 2010 implementation of the Hay study. Our judicial council passed a resolution supporting and implementing the Hay study with the pay grades that have been existing or assigned by our HR administration and in our own process. And of course, when the legislature at that time and the governor who came into office suspended that, the Judicial Council also followed and set that aside. What we're looking forward to in seeing what the methodology is for implementation, we understand that the legislature has listed an appropriation option, an amount for the courts for classified, if it goes through with classified jobs only, and another amount with unclassifieds. And so the work that we're looking to do is trying to understand more clearly how the implementation will be. I think looking forward to hearing about the decision behind recommending that 50% of the step would be for everybody under the general pay plan. What are those rationales, so we can follow suit, make a recommendation, and have the Judicial Council also make some decisions so that we can fully implement these increases by the February 15th deadline set in the statute. We also pointed out that there are some concerns with the attorney pay scale. We just want to make sure that we're the only branch that has a number of temporary attorneys that will be always employed at the judiciary. Law clerks, on average, are employed at the courts for 2 years, some less, some longer. They report directly to the judicial officer that they service, and it's never meant to be a career position. It's usually a stepping stone for many of the attorneys that are entering into practice, but the nature of law clerks here on Guam and throughout the country is that these are not meant to be career attorneys, and so their position classification is of an unclassified nature, and that is something that we want to make sure is recognized when the legislature, we believe, considers the attorney pay scale for adoption. It is different than the attorney pay scale that is currently in the statute. There are new positions or attorney fives that are not in the current statute that we want to make sure that these law clerks will be covered. But the main concern is the inclusion of the judiciary positions is inappropriate. If it were to be implemented, and let's say that it would, if we read it to override the Judicial Council's authority, then 67 positions or 60% of our workforce that are assigned to those positions would be downgraded. I recognize that policy has been set, that there are no employees that are going to be losing pay, but as we go forward and we continue to fill our vacancies, when we have retirements, it will cause problems, including in all of the divisions of the court. But we look forward to, again, answering any questions you may have.
And I'd like to make it official that we will include in the hearing for today the 3 letters, the letter from the Chief Justice to Benita, the response from Benita, and also your letter to the Speaker. All 3 will be included in today's record. I just have one question for Bobby. Between 2010 and 2014, how much interaction did you have with Department of Administration, HR, in the implementation of this new plan?
Well, thank you, Speaker. In 2010, there was we engaged diligently with DOA. One or 2 personnel were assigned through the committee, as Shane mentioned, in the evaluation committee and the training.
There was a lot of dialogue in terms of the plan or any follow-up in 2010. However, in pursuant to this plan, there has been no involvement from the
So between 2011 and today, there's been no involvement with it?
That's correct.
Thank you. And one other question, Mr. Sonorio. Why would we need to be concerned about the law clerks? If the judiciary claims to have authority over its personnel, why don't you just take your law clerks under your jurisdiction and not have to address them under the attorney?
I think that's because the law clerks are unclassified, and the pay scale, I believe, is for classified attorneys. Why don't you answer that part?
I think, Speaker, if the intention or the process is to obviously implement with classified only, the attorneys over in the AG's office are classified, so they would obviously participate in this implementation. Our law clerks and our attorneys are unclassified, so the specific language listed as classified only, I don't think the Judicial Council might be able to.
But why would you even be in
I
this
think that there's
comprehensive plan if you say that the statute says that the judiciary is completely separate? Then all of your employees should be completely separate. They shouldn't benefit from the attorney pay scale, nor should they be punished for it if they don't have the requisite number of years. If you want, as unclassified, to give them more than what they would be getting as with 5 years' experience as an attorney, that's at least what in the Chief Justice's letter, that's the authority of the judiciary to name the salary for its employees. You're either one or the other. You can't be in both and try to figure out where you're going to.
I understand your point. I think, though, that the issue is there is a question as to if this plan gets adopted, there is a question on whether or not what the legal implications would be to the Judicial Council maintaining that
But if
authority.
we do, as the Chief Justice says, and remove all judicial officer
Yes,
employees,
you're correct. Then we would.
then you have complete control over everybody, including your own law clerks.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Anybody have a question? Well, seniority-wise, it's yours. Okay. Okay.
Just a quick question. I know that Mr. Tenori alluded to awaiting any statements coming out of DOA or the executive branch in terms of how they're applying the 50% and the 100% component of this. But then, what would be the course of action of the Judicial Council in terms of being able to present its version of a Hay Plan adjustment within the constricted timeline of February 14? Are you aware of that?
Well, I think that, first of all, the statute didn't ask us to do that. But, of course, we are, and nor has the council acted yet. The number one driving factor would be the amount of money that is available and whether or not that amount is based on the decision whether or not to include classifieds or unclassifieds. And it's going to come down to, some math. And our recommendation to the council would be implementing that based on the fiscal capacity of the court to implement the salary increases that are involved based on, the Hay study, the pay grade, and salary amounts assigned by letter and step. That would be part of, the Judicial Council, the recommendation to the council, and then we would submit that to the legislature. But the driving force would be the amount of money we would have to implement it, and whether or not the legislature makes the appropriation available to pay for exclusively classified employees, or whether or not they would include the unclassifieds as well.
Well, I think the first step is obviously to honor the request of the Judicial Council, the Chief Justice, in terms of excluding the judiciary in this process. But then my question comes back again in terms of what is the course of action? Will there be something that could conceivably be submitted on behalf of the judiciary as this whole plan is implemented on February 14th?
Yes.
And moving forward, because obviously it's a very restricted timeline, and
No, the Judicial Council is prepared they are waiting for They will have an emergency meeting. We would do it before the time specified, and we would advise the legislature accordingly on how we would be implementing this. Yes.
Another aspect is obviously the funding component that you just alluded to, and I know that Ms. Maglonia had mentioned a little earlier that in the response, that the reason why DOA had included the judiciary, the attorneys, and some of the positions there is primarily because it's codified in law to some extent. Now, based on that formula that is being applied, I guess my question, and this is something that perhaps Ms. Maglonia would be able to respond to, is if in fact the $7 million would be inclusive of the judiciary based on their calculations. Because obviously once the judiciary, should the legislature move in the direction of segregating the judiciary, isolating the judiciary so that we honor the judicial council in establishing their pay plan, then whatever that percentage of the $7 million could conceivably be transferred, but honoring the wishes of the judicial council in implementing your version. So, I mean, that's where Ms. Maglonia perhaps will be part of the conversation sometime next week in terms of what that amount conceivably could be so that we can work with the executive branch and make sure that obviously all the employees are applied their compensation.
I would expect that, there are two amounts. I think it's 400 and some $1,000 if it's classified and unclassified. That's based on the formula that was in the Budget Act. Or it's 600 some $1,000 if it's exclusively classified. And so my impression is that would be if the proposal goes forward, which is for classified and unclassifieds, we would be planning for the 400 and some $1,000 to be used, and I don't think that we would expect that any other funds would be available to us from the executive branch. Based on the precedent that has been set with the payment of the merit bonuses and also the law enforcement officers employed at the judiciary. In both of those cases, the governor has directed us has informed us that he does not have the legal authority to transfer money to our branch for those purposes, and then redirected us down to the legislature for consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in my mind's eye, there's two distinctions between classified service and unclassified service, and going through this latest process, there seems to be another distinction just among the unclassified service in and of itself. So the classified service, you have individuals who have merit protection. They compete competitively for their positions. They respond to a job announcement. They have to identify and present their credentials and qualify in a rate. And you know how you go through that whole HR process. Then there's a set of unclassified employees that are underfilling a classified type position. For some reason, they're in the unclassified service, but they still compete for the job. They still rate, and they're still put into a certain letter and step pay grade. Then you have the unclassified service where you just have some appointing authority, identify the individual they want to hire. They ask that individual, do you want the job? This is what you're going to do. And so on my own authority, I'm going to bypass the pay letter and the pay step grade, and I'm going to decide on my own authority, what salary you're going to get. So just to be clear, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, those are the kinds of unclassified positions that I did not support getting this hay praise. If we have to differentiate between classified employees and unclassified employees, those are the kind of unclassified employees that should be lumped in together with the cabinet officials, the private secretaries, the elected officials, and those especially that are appointed and confirmed by the legislature. But I want to know, why is it then that we still have unclassified type employees throughout the government, given the Hauser decision, where it said that to the extent the impracticability of that position, so which is why the Attorney General, the Attorney General's lawyers were all, I guess, classified under that decision. And so when you have all these unclassified individuals that may have been hired outside of the the merit plan and the merit protections of those plans and those salaries that are set by those plans, somehow, some way, somehow, they have merit protection because of the Hauser decision. Do your staff attorneys that are unclassified, they were subject to some job description. They're subjected to some. How did they compete for the job, and how are they selected?
Senator, to your first question, what the Judicial Council did in front of Hauser is had a staff attorney opinion and created 4 standards, and I can certainly provide. And what these standards were if the job or the classification fit into those standards, particularly in a chamber staff, you have the chamber clerk, their chamber staff, others that are statutorily required to be unclassed, the clerk of court, the marshal, chief probation officer, and then as Mr. Tenorio mentioned, you have your law clerk. So if an occupation fit into these 4 standards, then they would be, it gave the express permission to the AOC to recruit them as unclassified. So we've gone through that. So our staff attorneys did not go through any competitive process. They're at will employment. Basically, the appointing authority interviewed them. If they met the credentials that they were looking for, they were appointed.
So that's the kind of unclassified service I'm trying to make the distinction.
Right.
So in those cases, Mr. Noro, those employees had to submit their resume and all their credentials in order to fit that position.
Right.
Yeah, and so, but then you have the other unclassified service where, in the case of the legislature, we certainly have a budget that we have to live within, and then we decide how many staff do we want, 5 staff or 3 staff, and then we pay them, accordingly. And so I think as we go forward and in anticipation of the public hearing we're going to have on the bill that we're going to see, I think we need to start trying to find those kinds of distinctions and how do you differentiate between the unclassifieds. And so if we can have that decision of the Judicial Council, I'm sure we can be guided by that, because in the executive branch you have unclassified employees that may be teachers, that may be other classified type positions. Then you have the unclassifieds where it's just those political appointees that didn't even have to go through some kind of credentialing. And so just so I'm clear, that is my position with respect to how we should handle the unclassified service. But if you can provide that as well, Mr. Chairman, I make that request. Yeah.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the panel, for being here. A quick question. I know you mentioned statutes prohibiting this, but I just want to ask if is the judiciary looking to do their own in-house study, or similar to the Hay or another group to do some study similar that will correct all this?
Well, the statute directs us, and I think it's maybe a statute that's been on the books for nearly 25 years, directs us to go with the Hay study or any revisions to the Hay study or a comparable study. And so I mentioned to the Vice Speaker that the National Center for State Courts, which is the professional organization of all of the judiciaries throughout the country, did conduct a compensation and pay study for the judiciary of Guam in 2010. At that time, though, the statute directed us to basically to consider and adopt the Hay study of 2010 for that brief period of time. And I think the Vice Speaker, in his communications to me, has made the question whether or not the council would again reconsider incorporating the findings of the National Center for State Courts into how we are going to assign the pay grades to our positions. And I should point out that for most of the positions, we are meeting the pay grades that are recommended or confirmed in some cases by the National Center for State Courts, with a few that are not. And so that would be another issue we would look at, but it's all really driven by the amount of money we have and how we can come up with a strategy that best gives these raises equitably across the board to all of our non-law enforcement judiciary employees because of the corrections in pay already implemented for the law enforcement officers.
Thank you very much. And maybe you should officially transmit to us that NCSC study, and maybe something from the Chief Justice as to whether or not the Judicial Council is going to opt in favor of implementing that in favor of the recommended pay scale in the Hay study. I mean, it may not be, you may not have time to do the action, but at least tell us that that's what you're planning on doing under the authority that he claims he has in that letter.
Sure.
All right? Thank you. Next, our other branch. Yes.
Good afternoon, Senators. I do see a couple of mayors and vice mayor out there in the. Okay. Mayor Hoffman, Vice Mayor Iriarte.
I note for the record there were other mayors. Mayor Gumatata was here. The two Mayor Blosses were here earlier. Mayor McDonald. Thank you, and it took longer than, but I'm intent on getting through. Fine.
Well, we're patient. We've waited over 20 years, so we'll wait a little bit more. Good afternoon, Vice Speaker and all the senators. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to just say a few words about the Mayor's Council of Guam and the salaries. You know, if it wasn't for this Hay study, we don't see any other opportunity for the unclassified employees of the Mayor's Council of Guam to get anything from anybody as far as salary is concerned. I have a folder here. It's a file of one of the, in fact, longest serving mayors on the island of Guam, and that's Mayor Nito Blas. And he started off with a salary of less than $6,000. And as you see in my breakdown there in front of you, he's now earning $46,000, a couple hundred after that. And that last pay adjustment was 20 years ago, in January of 1994. And since then, there's been nothing. For the unclassified employees, our maintenance people, our recreation leaders, our administrative assistants, our municipal clerk, there was an opportunity about 10 years ago to give them a little something, and that's simply because the legislature at that time gave the Gov Guam agencies and the Mayor's Council of Guam a lump sum budget. So we were able to, council at that time, decide on how to split up their budget. And so they gave a little bit more money to the personnel within their villages. Out of the 208 employees that we have in the Mayor's Council of Guam, only 7 are classified. So the rest are really counting on you to be able to see some sort of adjustment. We thank Governor Calvo and we thank Governor Tenorio for including the unclassified in this Hay study. We were included in the study when it was done back in 2010. Many of our employees, the only difference I see between them and a classified employee, say there, is the UN. Our administrative assistants do everything a classified administrative assistant does and more. Our maintenance leaders and our maintenance people do the same and even more maintenance work than workers out in the light agencies like GURA or Guam Housing or Public Works. They do the same thing. The only different position, unclassified position within our council that's not found anywhere else in the government of Guam is the municipal clerk. But they are clerks. They do things that you will find in different agencies that are assigned the tasks of clerk, except they're called municipal clerks. But if you look, many of them, their salaries are barely over minimum wage. And some of them, like the people that have been working for Mayor Nito Blas, have been working for 25 years at basically the same salary they entered into 25 years ago. They stay because they're dedicated to not just to their boss, to the mayor, but because they like what they do in serving the community. For the mayors and vice mayors, many of them too, have always stated that they will not accept the pay raise if their employees do not get a pay raise, because they can't fathom the idea of them as elected officials getting a pay raise, and then those that are working hard in the villages, the frontline workers, don't get anything. The mayors didn't ask for $75,000 or $67,000. I did. Simply because I saw the hard work that these mayors and vice mayors do on a daily basis. How many of us get called at 3 o'clock in the morning to come to someone's house because it's on fire? Or go to a street at 4 o'clock in the morning because some people are out there fighting? Or go at 5 o'clock in the morning and pick up a kid that the bus didn't come for? Or come at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to pick up a kid that the bus didn't come for again? Or to do things that many of us don't do on a daily basis. Pick up dead dogs or cats because the agency responsible does not have the personnel to do it. Or to clean out culverts because of flooding because the agency responsible does not have the equipment to do it. Every 2 weeks we have agencies and community organizations that come to our meetings in the Mayor's Council of Guam. And for every meeting that they come to present to us, they're always asking, what can the mayor's office do for them? Can they help them? Can they support them? Can they coordinate for them? Can they put out services for them? Because they can't do it on their own. They have to count on the mayor or the vice mayor and that village to assist them. And the mayors and vice mayors and their workers really never ask for anything in return, except, yes, we'll try to do what we can for you with whatever resources we have. And I'd like to thank our oversight chair, because she's always been there asking us, what can she do to be able to support our mayors and vice mayors and our employees? This is one way of helping us. This is an opportunity for our workers to finally get not the recognition that they deserve, but at least a little of the pay that they deserve. Because without this, there'll be no other route except for us to go and do our more fundraisers for bingo and probably ask you for something in legislation that would allow us to use our bingo revenues to pay for our employees and give them a pay raise. If you look at the salaries of mayors and vice mayors that are in insular areas, they've been making salaries way more than Guam's mayors have been for many, many years. And we put that in there. Puerto Rico has 78 mayors. Each one of them gets over $60,000. The CNMI, although their salaries are comparable to Guam, they also control a lot of things that Guam mayors don't. They control the police department. They control the Department of Public Works. So those mayors can actually do what they want, and they still get the budgets of those agencies to be able to do the work for them. So in that sense, they have the money and the resources to do the work of the Department of Public Works, the work of the police department, the work of hiring who you want to be your resident manager to probably come forward and tell you what other duties that they do that you don't see. And I've heard talk about the classified and unclassified, and perhaps if there is going to be a bill proffered to affect this case study, that whatever happens to the unclassified employees of the Mayor's Council of Guam, that they be slotted to the positions that the classified position would be in the government of Guam, so that they're not out there again in left field just wondering in the air what we're going to slot them into. If you're an administrative assistant in the unclassified service of the MCOG, then should be slotted to the administrative assistant pay that is being proposed in the Hay study. If you're a maintenance worker, maintenance leader, recreation supervisor, recreation leader, whatever, you should be slotted into those classified positions in the government of Guam. And that if there's going to be a bill, I would ask that maybe someone make that amendment so that we are guaranteed that our unclassified employees at least get closest to the classified Hay study position base that they can, instead of us trying to second guess what we should give to them. So that's all I have to say. Like I said, we thank you for this opportunity. We don't see any other opportunity for this to come by for our employees to get what they've been waiting for a long time. They've been, they've heard talk about it happening for many years, and every time they have the hope, it gets dashed from them because of funding issues. Now that we've heard that the Director of Administration say that she has the money to fund these things, we humbly ask for your support to, at least for the Mayor's Council of Guam, to be able to be given a slice of the pie. Not the crumbs, but the pie. Thank you very much.
Very much. Mayor Hoffman.
Sure, thank you. And actually, I worked on this many years ago with then Inarahan Mayor Chaidik. We actually had a roundtable. We all sat down and said, write down everything you do as mayors. Because we have, in the legislation, we have 18 things we're required to do as part of our duties. No other job in the government of Guam actually lists their position and what they're supposed to do. Then on top of that, we went and did some research. 73 additional duties issued by the legislature to sit on boards, to serve on boards. We cannot send representatives. We sit on and we serve on 30 plus boards. So, and every time, then we're also required to coordinate, to work with, and it's all these interactions with all the other agencies. So in essence, we become those little administrators. We always tell people, don't let the title fool you, because I always hear that. Why does Guam need 19 mayors? We're city administrators. We're glorified dog catchers. We're all these other things. Don't let the title fool you. We were commissioners then. We even joked around, let's change our titles to chiefs then, like the village chiefs, because that's what we do. We settle disputes, we marry people. We don't divorce them, but these are the things that we do. I said, we have so many duties, and even our employees, and we always do our employee scale pay rates this way. $8 is the recreation leader gym staff, $9 maintenance, $10 clerks, $11 secretaries and administrations. No other place in the government of Guam makes that. Not even here, your employees make that little. But if you look at our municipal clerk, I'll use an example. There are customer service reps, there are utility reps, there are disaster response coordinators. There are all these things on top of it, but they're held to the title that we can't change their title. We can't, how other agencies can do it, say, okay, I'll make you an analyst or a senior aide, or it's just your clerk. So even if when they go and apply for another job outside after leaving service, they're like, what your title was clerk. Yes, you did all these other things, but we're just going to take what you were paid to do on your side here. So if we dwindle it down to what's on their actual job description, it's very minimal. But all the last part at the discretion of the mayor, then we take on all these responsibilities, like Angel said, from funerals to all the other things that we're doing. We work on holidays. If you have a family event on a holiday and you need a mayor, they're there to help with that service. On Christmas, on any kind of day, events, Labor Day, we're working on Labor Day, bringing chairs and canopies to Labor Day and taking it up, when we should be enjoying that. So that's kind of where we're at. No other position in the government. I did that. I searched the word senator on the Guam Code Annotated. I searched the word governor, searched the word mayor, and all these things, and you'll see how many times it appears on certain pieces of legislation. We have the most in terms of position title that we're required to do, to assist, to help, to augment, and it just keeps getting more. We've got the school responsibility just a few years ago on that end. And we're actually, I know Senator Pangilinan is working to put us on the Guam Education Policy Board on that. So it's constantly growing on our end. So we're hoping that we really just keep that in mind, $8, $9, $10, $11. Who would want to do that job, and especially for 24 years and stuff like that. So we really feel for them. I would love to call them something else. I would love to call them chiefs of staff or, mayor's aide or whichever else. But there's no other position like the mayor in the world that here's the mayor in Guam. When Philippine mayors come here and they find out what we do, they're like, really? You don't have, oh no, we don't have staff. We actually do that. We don't have, we are our own bodyguards in that sense. We put ourselves on in length. We don't get overtime. Then our employees don't get overtime or differential or any other kind of compensation. It's basically set that, but we have to work hours. Last night when we were there during the Democratic meeting watching the building, the staff that's watching the building are doing it for free. And they're doing it because they're just waiting for public events to end, and then they close up. Same thing. If anyone has a party this weekend, they will be there. They will open up, clean up, close up. So let's try to do the right thing for them. So we appreciate your efforts on it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Vice Speaker, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity. I want to share with all of you here that I had the opportunity to speak to the chairman here and shared with him that it was my responsibility to continue to advocate for the mayors and vice mayors, and more importantly, for the employees. And just listening to the both of you as it relates to the employees of the Mayor's Council of Guam, I wanted to share the actual positions that you just mentioned, the $8, $9, $10, $11, and being slotted and asking to be slotted into the right position. Was there any communication with DOA as this whole compiling of data was given, that the request to being slotted in those actual positions, that the duties that could be equivalent to or similar to what's already portrayed, what's already in the government of Guam description mandate, was that communicated to DOA?
Senator, it actually was hard because it varied per village. Southern villages spend time cleaning greenways, clearing roads, and all the other things. I didn't. So when we had to do the percentages, they were shocked, first of all, when we gave them, they're like, you guys do all this? Like, yeah, we do all this.
Yeah,
and
so
they couldn't set a specific way because Inarajan spends 40% more time doing greenways and stuff. Dededo has 9 schools. I have 1 school. So when we came down to how much time do you spend versus grass cutting, entertaining customers, I have maybe 10 in a day that comes to Sinahani for verifications and some assistance. Dededo gets 100. So there was that dispatch. So they could not, even them were always saying, okay, how are we going to kind of move forward here? Because you can't say that the community worker in Umatic will fit in the same structure as this, because there's very different roles and responsibilities to do. We do escorts and do all the other things. Spreading coral, Mangilao does that, and all the other villages we don't need to in certain areas Sinan because it's paved. So it was very hard for them to do. So at the time when we met the people to study, they were dumbfounded, like, we can't figure this out here, because how do you get 203 people and figure out that they're all doing something different? We're making it work. We're providing after-school programs, summer programs, but we can't require a mayor to do these things either. We can't say you have to do an escort, but those that are doing it, we're augmenting police.
And I understand the concerns you're bringing up, but one of the recommendations by the executive director was to make sure that the position of all the unclassifieds in the mayor's council, that they be at least slotted equivalent to
the
that.
best
So
of average,
how
yes.
do you work that? Because I'd like to advocate for that, but I want to make sure that I would be doing them justice and not injustice. Because you said that a municipal clerk is nowhere to be found in the position description of DOA. So how do we as policy makers make it work for your employees so that there is parity or fair compensation across the board? And that's what I wanted to ask for you, because I want to say that the chair was sharing with me, yes, I understand that you would do that for your advocation for the mayors and the vice mayors and their employees, but for me, how does that parity work?
And the reason why I asked for that amendment was going to be done is because when our employees submit their applications for a clerk or for a recreation leader or for a maintenance worker, they are actually rated by DOA based on the classified position or what that title is. And they'll come back to us and say, oh, Mr. Sublon, this application, he needs a few more months of work to be able to qualify for a recreation leader or to qualify for a maintenance you're basing it on a classified position. It's not as if we just choose the person and put them in there and make them work whether they have the qualifications or not. We go through the process. They vet that position, the application, and they come back and tell us, yes, this person is qualified. We'll pick them up. If they're not, we tell the mayor that they're not qualified. You need to at least get some other person that has the basic clerical knowledge or experience to be able to fit in this position. So in 2010, when all these were submitted to DOA and they came back with their findings, we saw that in some positions they were only basing it on what the mayor's office was doing, not on what a basic maintenance worker would be doing in another agency. But when we compared the work, it's basically the same, except that the mayor's workers were doing more. But yet, when the pay suggestions came back, our workers were only being given 9 cents, 10 cents, 11 cents more than what they were already getting compared to the ones in the classified services. They're offering $50, $60, $2 more. And so we couldn't understand that. And then we at that time said, well, if this is what's going to be, we might as well not have a Hay study because some of our people didn't even move. Some of our people moved down. And so that's why we wanted to make sure that if this does happen, because we base our employees' performance on a classified position and the job description of that classified position. So we're just asking that in all fairness, at least they be paid for that position in the classified service that you're doing just because it's called unclassified.
Mr. Chair, I want to just note for the record that I just want to make sure that the unclassified employees that are working for the mayors, if that work is more than what a position description is within the Department of Administration, then that compensation, I know that they talked about that appeal process, and maybe one step up or two step up, depending on what is already
well, it's good that
description,
they have a range
then
now. They have
that
a
the range
of,
would be
yeah,
that they
what
would
you
be
can make.
included in that. So know that I will continue to advocate for that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, Vice Speaker, sorry. Am I hearing correctly that you are interested in turning your unclassified into classified employees?
No, they're unclassified simply because they're political. You know, they're hired by the village mayors. Once
Right.
the mayor comes in, usually the staff would just and a new mayor comes in, the staff would submit their courtesy resignation, just like everybody else that's politically appointed. We're not asking for them to be changed from unclassified to classified service. What we're saying is that the work they do is not much different from a classified worker.
No, because
And
what I thought I
maybe
heard.
it's an idea that we have to look into, maybe for a few positions in the mayor's office, like maybe the administrative assistant, so that there is continuity in that position. So when somebody comes in for like a village verification or something, that the person that's already been there doing it for the past 4 years is still the same person. You don't have the new person coming to, where do I find you, or what's your last name, or who's your, things like that. So
Okay,
it's something that we may have to revisit, but I also know that because and I don't know how the mayor feels, but I'm sure that when he comes in as a mayor, he would want to bring his people in that are going to be loyal to him.
And I think that management tool is very
Yeah.
important to an office succeeding, for you to be able to pick your team.
Right.
And so when I thought I heard you saying that you were supportive of turning them into
We actually toyed the idea of if the term unclassified, it seems like a dirty word here, but whether it be because you have GG1, but you have like a GG1 employee, a general government employee, and then you can maybe unclassified, but with a special annotation saying, this is kind of exactly like your employees here. You're right. It's your team that you're going to fulfill. This is what I ran on. I'm going to do these programs. These are my issues I'm going to champion. So we said maybe create a GG2 type of classification. So we're not considered, you're just all political hacks or anything like that, because far from that. We always try to find, you have to hire people who live within your village. You don't want to hire from, you're committing political suicide if you hire everybody outside your district. So there's no way you can do that when you apply saying, I have a grass cutting job and I can't hire you because you're not from Sinahan. Then I'm discriminating against them. Then they're going to get mad at me and do all the other things. So we kind of find that team within that area, but we're constantly looking for good talent that we can. My clerk has an accounting degree from the University of Guam. He's still getting. I thought you can get a lot more money. Go work for Deloitte and everything, but he enjoys doing because he's helping us fix the government in that area. We're actually, our NAFs are a lot better. The OPA is very impressed. We're getting all the training. We're allowing them to go to training for all these other things. We want them to get better and really just to move on in that other aspect. So I agree with you. Trying to find a proper term for them would be better, because we've heard it from all of you in the past days that you support the Mayor's Council in this effort, and we thank you for that. And it's promising for them. There are smiles right now and everything, because they've never seen that in them. There's a light in them saying they're going to finally understand what we do here, and you see that. When the heavy rains these last 2 days, we're wondering, I wonder, is anybody calling other people to do this job that we're doing right now, clearing the culverts and the storm drains this early in the morning, because we're getting those calls, like they said. So finding another classification for them would be interesting, for maybe a great way to explore it as a Mayor's Council tool, because we would have come to you either way. If we did get the Hay study, we probably would have asked you in a separate bill, is there something we can do for the mayors to reclassify our titles or something? So.
Anybody on this side?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I made it very clear when I spoke earlier that I support an increase for classified and unclassified, but my holdback is on the leadership side because of the quality of life issues. I think that we need to meet that certain standard. My one exception to that hard line that I'm taking is mayors. I think that the mayors do deserve an increase, but if we're not going to be increasing senators or the governor or any directors, there's going to be a huge disparity that we're going to throw into the loop if mayors go up to 75,000, which is the current proposal. And so what I wanted to ask was, if we're going to try and balance this out, where we're not giving increases to senators or to directors or deputies or to the governor, but we do want to give us an increase to the mayors, what would work? Because right now this plan is saying 75,000. But if we're not going to be giving increases to any of those other leadership positions, obviously that's going to create a major disparity. And I know that the mayors deserve an increase, vice mayors also, Mr. Iriarte. So where can we find middle ground there if we're going to be moving forward a proposal that's going to have a slight increase for mayors? What kind of compromise can we get the mayors to back?
I don't think we'd answer that now. I probably have to go back to the whole body and really address it and say what's something they can work with. And like you, we give a majority of our salary away. People come in, car wash, matais, you name it. I see you at all the matais. And so, I mean, I have 40 alone in Sinahani every year. So just imagine all that you're doing. So it's the same way. So it's something we would have to talk about as a whole of really, like you say, the quality of life stuff that we're working with and what we're capable of doing. Majority of us don't have that kind of ability. Most of us really just right out of the pocket, power bills and all. So I would love to see if the rest of the mayors can come up with an agreeable amount if that's the case. So.
My only concern is because of this whole timeline constraint that we put into with the governor's proposal having to take effect on the 14th, and if we're going to make an adjustment, we're going to have to meet all these other timelines by law, the notice for the public hearing, the time that we de facto for the governor to consider signing. And so if we're going to be affecting the mayor's amount through any legislation that's going to have adjustments, we're going to need to know that very quickly.
Could we do it before the public hearing that the chairman has called? So we'll call an emergency meeting probably for Monday and get everybody in the same room and kind of work that out. But it's like I said, it's been a process prior to even the Hay Group when we sat down with then Mayor Taidagui and we actually had an employee have all fill out the surveys and this is what you're going to do. So it'd be nice to kind of sit that down.
I just want to add one thing though, that to be fair to the mayors, the Hay study did recommend a $65,000 and up salary for them, adjustment for them. But having said that, if you look at the current pay of directors and the deputy directors of the government of Guam, many of them, all of them, earn much, much more than a mayor or a vice mayor does. And when you look at all the laws of Guam, even fact Title 40, on the statutes that governs the Mayor's Council of Guam, everywhere in there, it states the directors and deputy directors of agencies shall cooperate, coordinate, and assist the mayors or the vice mayors of Guam. It doesn't say the mayors and the vice mayors shall assist the director or deputy director of all the agencies. It says that these public servants who are the leaders in their departments are to assist the mayors and the vice mayors. But when you look at the salary structure, it's like mayors and vice mayors are servants to these directors and deputy directors because they earn double the salary of a mayor or vice mayor. So if you're going to adjust it, maybe the only fair thing would be is to follow what the Hay study
I mean, I hear where you're coming from, Mr. Sablon, and I'm just going to say something that's on my mind. I mean, senators, our salary is 60, and of course,
You all earn
directors.
less than them too.
Yeah, I mean, directors, of course, are way up there too. But as we search for parity here, I mean, for a mayor's salary to all of a sudden jump above a senator's, that I mean, if we put that question before our people, I even think our people will come back and say, how does that work out? So if senators aren't going to be going up at all, but we do want to give an increase to mayors, then we're kind of looking at that almost as like a parity point that we're going to have to find a middle ground on. And I know that it's not a I mean, I know that the mayors, they hear 75,000, they're like, wow, My wife, when the Hay study first came out, and I told her, "Hun, it says 85 for senators," she's like, "Woohoo!" But then I said, "Hun, I'm sorry, but I just can't do that." And of course, she just gave me the look like, "Oh, doghouse for you." But I mean, that's where we are, and so for senators, I don't think that we're gonna be. Well, for me personally, moving senator salaries up is not something that I can get behind. And if we're having senators at 60, mayors, we're gonna have to figure out how that's gonna fit in within that whole thing. I mean, I don't want to devalue the service of mayors. You guys do tremendous work, and you guys know what you do. Your community knows what you do, and they'll reelect you because of how hard you work. Finding the right magic number for us to be able to fit everything in that makes sense is where we're going to have to work together on. And so if the mayors can just please keep that in mind and work quickly, Mayor Hoffman, if you can, because we're under a tight time schedule to try and get something equitable out that's going to fit within the all the law constraints that we have to meet certain deadlines also. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quick, I thank you for this information, and it's pretty interesting how you were trying to bring everything into perspective to how the salary, and obviously, I know my colleague mentioned earlier trying to find a middle ground, but obviously based on this research, I know the work and that is identified and per your mandates, and that you've come to some conclusion that this is where you feel is the middle ground. Even with me publicly stated, perhaps you don't even, just like you, Mayor, I know you're saying you want to go back, and just like me, I don't want to get in front of my colleagues, but of course I have my own personal reservations at the same time, and I also stated perhaps sometime maybe we could look at a middle ground as well, because I understand my colleagues work very hard and long hours and do extensive research and are out there in the community and doing a lot of work. But and of course, mentioned by Benita earlier, and the administration stating the governor found a middle ground for himself as well. I mean, I guess the first draft came out about 160, 170, bringing it down to something he felt was reasonable, that was a middle ground for himself, the lieutenant governor and his the unclassifieds, right? And I agree. I mean, the unclassified and classifieds, we are one government, and we should look at everybody in the same vein that they are doing hard work out there. I just want to take that approach, and I thank you for providing that, and learning also that there are also, aside from the administrators, your maintenance guys that are out there, you also have recreation leaders. Are these all in the 19 villages, or?
The 12 senior centers that have Manumco managers, they're recreation leaders. Then those that have gym staff, they're the recreation leaders. And then most offices that don't have it have somebody that we task a clerk to organize sports or organize some kind of intramural. So they end up playing that role also, a dual role that way. So they end up being everything else with that, the cashier, customer service, you name it. They do the job because that mayor's vision at the time wants them to do that. So only 12 centers, and then I think 6 gyms, right? 7 gymnasiums. So have recreation leaders.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree, and we're looking at the study that came out. I'm looking at that plan and trying to see, of course, at least we have a plan to work with and see where we can structure accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker, and thank you very much, Mayors, for presenting your perspective in regards to the any pay adjustment, and most especially reaching out to your personnel and your staff, because I think that any one of us who have worked closely with the mayor's offices understands that they're all 24/7 to a great extent based on the mayor's responsibility in calling upon your team members. And I say that because obviously on Wednesday night I was at a meeting with the mayor in Sinahanya up until about 9:15 p.m. And starting a day off at 6:30 and then concluding your day at 9:50, 9:30, it certainly has an impact on family life. And I just want to say thank you very much to all our island mayors for your dedication and reaching out to our people, and also for recognizing your personnel. I guess the one question I would have is with regards to slotting your personnel into the appropriate personnel description category. Doesn't the if I just so that I can understand the process, doesn't the Mayor's Council of Guam have that authority at this point in time, or do you need it reaffirmed in the law? Because I would think that based on your mandate and your statute and the flexibility that's provided in terms of expending your resources and whatnot, that you already have some flexibility to that extent. So if I could just get a clarification on that, please.
We have the flexibility to name them whatever we want to name them as far as the workers in the villages, but we don't have the flexibility of the funding. We are whatever funds we get as an appropriation for that fiscal year, we can only work within those parameters. And the Mayor's Council, one of the mayors have voted that this is going to be the salary for those positions, the rec leaders, the maintenance workers. So it's across the board. Some mayors, to get around that, actually don't fill all the positions. They say one position, make it vacant, so that money is available for them to adjust the four others a little bit up. You know, so there are some creative ways to do it. But what we're saying here is that the positions that we take following the classified is basically the same work that they do, but we couldn't pay them the same as the classified because we can't give them annual increments because we don't have the luxury. Although unless we cut out some positions, we couldn't give them the benefits, you know, and like overtime, things like that. They're stuck. You work 40 hours a week and you work on weekends, you still just get the 40 hours.
So you're saying more or less, I mean, obviously the mayors have the flexibility to adjust personnel salary based on the allocation. What you're saying is that some of the equivalent positions in the classified category, let's say for example a classified position starts at $12 an hour. Right now, based on the flexibility that mayors have, you're only able to get them $10 an hour. So you're asking that they be slotted into an appropriate classified position category, so that in fact it would bring everyone up to par in terms of applying equity across the board in the government.
Because the mayor now can take the $12 position, but that means he has to sacrifice one position.
One
to
position,
do that.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker.
There being no further questions, thank you very much, Mayor and Mr. Swan. Thank you. You're excused. We as a community are able to have these hearings and the freedom of democracy only because men and women like the next person I'm going to call up. I don't know if he signed up, but he's been sitting here since 10:30. So I imagine he wants to speak. And first I want to thank him, and through him thank the 600 men and women that were in Afghanistan this last 9 months for their service to our country. And I want to recognize the chief of the Guam Fire Department, welcome him back, that I'm happy that he's safe and that you're here, and I really want to again thank you for your service, and please extend to all the 600 plus men and women at the Guam National Guard and the other military that serve to protect our freedoms and to provide us this opportunity to have hearings like this. I'm embarrassed that everybody has left, but I want to hear your testimony because it's imperative that we hear yours.
Thank you, Senator, and ladies and gentlemen of this body. I will accept that appreciation on behalf of the Guam Army National Guard, my fellow brothers and sisters in arms, and I'll definitely pass it on. You know, I was sitting in the corner. You know, as of right now, I'm on leave, and try to maintain the respect for my acting fire chief, who's currently running the department. I was trying my best to kind of stay out of the issues until I return, which I return next month, February 10th. But this particular issue does directly affect myself, and as well as my peers, my cabinet members, as well as the many unclassified and classified employees that come February 10th I'll be in charge of. And I just want to say from the beginning that I fully support this Hay study plan, and I've been looking forward to it, to be honest, for a while. I believe the entire government deserves it. Being one of those firefighters from the front line, joining the government services in '95, many of you know this, we went through over 15, 19 years without a promotion opportunity, without pay raises, watching our fellow brothers, not only stateside, but just here on island, and the federal and military services get their due compensation as what's is appropriate, and to finally be caught up with the 40% that this body allowed to happen. That said, I was actually listening to everything that was going on here, and up into just the comments by Senator Nicholas and Senator Respicio, I was confident, or at least I understood the message from this body, that you support the Hay plan. You were just concerned about the ability to finance it, not only the near term but the long term. And I give respect to Benita for, I came from a combat zone, and it's tough sitting here, taking all the bullets coming at you, and that in itself is deserving of some executive pay. Because I challenge any private sector CEO who has to come up and face a body like this, answering questions for a plan that's not even implemented yet. And that brings me to my point. It seems to me that we're focusing on the eaches here, on a plan that hasn't even been implemented yet. What I've learned and what I've done in my department and what has been successful for me is to come up with a plan and implement it, supervise and refine it. And that's what this body is for. No plan is perfect. I know it seems to me that we're asking for a perfect plan, but no plan is perfect. And that's, Nate, Shane, mentioned many times that there's an appeal process to this, not only through DOA, but even this body itself can make changes as time goes on, which you have done many times. For myself, as you all know, I took a huge pay cut. Now with the 40%, it even becomes bigger. And I will tell you that over 80 to 90% of my firefighters make more than the position of the fire chief. And that's just wrong in every sense of the word. All right? Talking about quality of life, Senator Nicholas, I grew up in the South in a wooden tin structure, went to school at Aaron High School with no aircon. Today's quality of life is actually pretty good. All right? And to blame it on one class of employees, being the managers and directors, I think is unfair. Because I can tell you, in my time as the fire chief, you guys seen it. Because of the support of this body, as well as the allowance of the governor to let me do my job, we've been able to turn our department around almost 180 and actually moved it forward several decades. And we're not done yet, but we're going to get things going again when I'm there, continuing off what my acting fire chief has maintained. But I will tell you, just within my position alone, we don't need to look far to see that it's unequal to those in the same position. Anderson, yes, it's military, they got funding, but they put a value on that fire chief way above the salary that I'm making today, that I will be making when I return. The federal GS level, they put it way above as well. We're talking over $30,000 difference. And that is just talking about fire chief, and I've done the research. Same thing goes with the police chief. Same thing goes with any agency head. And while I don't disagree with the mayors on their responsibility and that they're deserving of the salary, to include yourselves, the fire chief and every director in this cabinet or in this government deals with over 170,000 people on this island, all 19 districts or villages, not just one community or one village. And I think that's deserving in itself, just like yourselves. And it's a tough subject to talk about, your personal compensation when you're at the leadership level. And normally, from what I've learned, this kind of stuff is done in a closed door room when leaders are talking about what they deserve, because leaders are supposed to be all about the people that work for them. And I am truly that, and I know you guys are. And there's no argument that they deserve it. But I will add, and because I won't be here come next Friday for your public hearing, I just wanted to come here and say that you need to take this as a total solution and refine it as I know you guys got the phone calls. Shane has gotten the phone calls, and Benita. But you're talking about a select population that have individual solutions that need to be acted upon individually. But they probably didn't get phone calls from over 5,000, 8,000 GovGuam employees that are going to be satisfied with this HASTE study, that truly deserve it, since we haven't had one since 91. And, you know, we talk about trust and verify. You know, some of you know that I am not a political animal at all. All right? Nobody knew me before I came up to supporting the many chiefs that went through this board right here. So to say that, you know, we want to take away from the spoils, and you know that they're putting unqualified people in front of you, what mitigates that is this body right here. I can say that myself. I went through a 4-hour confirmation hearing. All right, so you know, Senator Nicholas, I think although I know this is your first term and we're probably related one way or the other, you know, this body is responsible for that leadership too. You know, you guys blessed off on me, and yes, I've done my best to serve the people, and I want to continue to serve the people, to be a leader for my department. But I have to be honest, I have a family to support. I have a quality of life that I am used to, that I've worked hard to get to, and I just don't see it being maintained at the current salary that I'm being paid right now. Especially coming back, only serving as a captain in the Army, the bottom of the totem pole in the officer corps, and getting paid way more than a fire chief. I was only in charge of 78 soldiers. I'm in charge of 300 employees in the Guam Fire Department. People that save lives every day, every night. We talk about 24/7 phone calls. You know, I get them too. I actually respond to. So the same with my fellow directors, the same with the police chief. So I'm just asking you guys before we get real quick and trying to cut off the sacrificial lamb, being the cabinet members as well as yourselves as the senators and the governor, I ask that you consider those things before we jump into it. I say, in my opinion, you should implement it as is and then refine it as you see fit. And that's all I have to say, sir.
Thank you very much, Chief. And again, thank you very much for carrying back our gratitude to the men and women that served with you and under you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker and Cap and Chief. Obviously, thank you for your service and congratulations on the return, safe return of most of our troops. Just, I guess, in this regard, I know you said plan and implement and then refine. The challenge that we're faced with on this end, it all boils down to commitment. Once a pay adjustment is given to our public employees, you will not find me rescinding that unnecessarily. I mean, if the revenues drop $30 million, which is exactly what happened in one month back in 2002, difficult decisions have to be made at the spur of the moment. But considering the circumstances today, you're going to see members of this body, once the $27 million, which is a conservative figure on an annualized basis, $27 million commitment is made to our public employees in the HASTE study, then we need to live up to it, and we need to find a way to make sure that it's continually funded every year on moving forward. And that's why the plan has been presented. We are looking at the plan. We're trying to digest exactly what the cost structure is going to be, and then once it's implemented on the 14th of February, we want to make sure that the plan is implemented fully and that we can sustain it in fiscal year 15, 16, and on down the line, and make sure that it's affordable for the people of Guam, because it's a tremendous investment in our public employees, and rightfully so. They deserve it after 20 years. But that's where really the challenge comes in from this end, in terms of looking at the plan and making sure that, yes, we're going to implement it, but we want to make sure that we can carry it out for the duration and make that outright commitment and investment in our public employees, that when you get your pay raise, you will not find us step back in and rescind it, because that was a commitment on the part of the 15 members of this body and the commitment of the chief executive as well as the leadership in the executive branch. So that I just wanted to say that, because it's about refinement And that's exactly why we're here 20 years later, because we're trying to get the classified pay structure aligned with national standards and aligned with performance and tasks assigned. And once that commitment is made, I can assure you, I don't think you're going to find too many people that's going to try to want to come in and refine that downward. And we want to make sure that that commitment is carried out indefinitely. So thank you very much for your presentation. And again, thank you for your service. I salute you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, thank you so much for your service also. You know, I mean, what you've done and what all of your brothers and sisters have done is something that I cannot even begin to imagine or to put into words. You know, there's just an immense gratitude throughout this island for all of that sacrifice. You represent your position very well, sir, and you make a lot of sense. And I would encourage you to run for senator, but then you take an even bigger pay cut. And you know, my position is not that I don't believe that management should get an increase at all. What I'm saying is that when this whole hay thing came out and I saw all of those amounts, and I thought about the quality of life of our people, I agree with you. You know, times have gotten better with all the hard work of my colleagues who've been here for many years. I was born in a tin shack too. I went to public school all my life. I know about the no air cons in the classrooms. And now it's getting better in many ways, you know, and that's the progress of our community that we can all be proud of. For me, I always sit back and I ask myself, how can we try and set a standard and an expectation that will make sure that we continue to make progress and we depoliticize almost the pay that leaders get? Because you're right, you know, whenever a leader tries to talk about increasing how much they make, you can just forget about you can forget about having any peace. And so for you to come up and testify like you did and to do it so well, it's a great service to all leadership positions. You know, because that really is one of the biggest challenges we face as leaders is we have an expectation of our people, and meeting that expectation is something that we all have to work for. While at the same time, we also have to provide. And my wife would very much agree with, I'm sure, your wife about compensation for leaders and how, you know, we need to provide as well. And that's something that I think about a lot. You know, with my wife in her position in the government as a school assistant principal, with her next increment, she'll be making more than I am. You know, and sky's the limit for her. You know, but for leadership, we get pegged, we get stuck. You know. And what I would like to try to do is unpeg that. You know, I think that increases should be something that we definitely work towards. But how do you justify an increase for a leader? You know, how do you go back to your people and say, hey, you know, it's time to move us up? And one of the ways is the way the Hay study recommends, where they compare us to other places. And I agree that by comparison, to include our mayors, our fire chief, our leaders have a long way to go. You know, senators too. But comparison is one thing. Delivering on the expectations of our people is another. And I know that you work very hard every day as a fire chief to make sure you do that. You know, you're obviously a man of integrity. Every time I've communicated with you and spoken with you, that you know, you definitely put your heart and soul into the job, just like we all do. In the end, no matter how hard we work or how good our hearts are and how much we give of ourselves, in the end, it's whether or not our people have moved up. You know, for me at least, that's my perspective. Did our people move up? And if they didn't move up, should we? You know, and so one of the things I'm looking at with this whole Hay study proposal with respect to leaders and managers is provision for an increase, but set certain standards. And if those standards move up, if unemployment goes up, if crime goes down, if healthcare costs don't go up, then increase. Go ahead. You know, not necessarily for senators, but definitely for you guys, because you guys are the ones who are managing everything and making that quality of life go up. And if you do, get it. And if you don't, how can we really justify it? That's really my position. I don't think that, you know, absolutely not, no managers, no, the governor shouldn't. No, I think that we should give our managers and our governor a pay increase if and only if we've moved up. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I know that certain things like unemployment, what does that have to do with a fire chief? You know, what what I'm hoping is if we can set that kind of standard where everybody has a shared benefit, then a very good man like yourself will look at the Guam Economic Development Authority and say, hey, you guys better get your act together because the economy's not growing. That's your responsibility. Come on now, how can I help? You know? And then by that self-regulating environment, that almost self-policing environment where, you know, you're doing your part maybe to keep the public safety issues addressed, that and your integrity and your delivery on the job will empower you to look at everybody else, every one of your fellow managers and say, I'm pulling my weight, guys, you need to pull yours too. You know, and as a military man, I think you can also understand that. You know, from when it comes to leadership and delivering on the expectation, whether it's in the military or in the government, in the end, the mission needs to get accomplished. And what's our mission as government leaders, and are we accomplishing that mission? And if we're not, should we get more pay? That's where I'm at. And but I do appreciate your testimony, and I very much appreciate your service. And I again would very much encourage you to run for senator if you can afford that pay cut. But thank you, Chief St. Nicholas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. You know, if I can just add one that I failed to mention in my opening, you get what you pay for, and you're talking about holding standards and holding accountability. It's a catch-22, no matter which way you look at it. You pay a $50,000 manager, you're going to get a $50,000 work ethic out of him, and that's the bottom line. You know, I hate to strip it down to the bare minimum, but that's my opinion. That's what I've learned. You pay what you get for. I mean, you get what you pay for, and we saw two fire chiefs or appointed fire chiefs come to this table, and this legislature said they weren't good enough. Basically said that, you know, the body previous. You know, so that tells me that, okay, the money was enough to attract them, but this legislature said it wasn't good enough. So it's there. The accountability is there. You're going to attract those, that quality of manager based on what the pay is. It's the bottom line. And for those that you want to have sit in this position, they're not gonna accept it. I don't know what happened to me when I first came in. I think I think I'm doing an okay job. I know I can do better. But to take a pay cut, must be nuts to do it. But at that time and still today, my passion is strong, and I want to do what I can and do. You know, can I take the hit? Yeah, I can take it, but it hurts, and it doesn't remove the bruise. So, you know, it's hard to separate my personal thoughts about it with the reality that, you know, you get what you pay for. I can't simplify it anymore. And I think that this level of positions, this level of management, being executive, not just middle managers, we're not talking supervisors, we're talking executive management, people who you can hire and fire if they're not doing the job right. Classified, I mean, it takes an act of Congress almost to fire a classified employee. Okay, unclassified, they're not doing the job that you're paying them to do, fire them. That's simple. So I think that for somebody to step out and take that risk, they deserve a little bit more value towards it. So I thank you, Senator, and thank you. I look forward to talking to you more.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker. Chief, I'm incredibly proud of you. You're an Enron High School graduate. That school gave birth to so many wonderful leaders in our island. I'm proud of you for being a leader today, for protecting our nation, for coming home. And I do remember how you came to this hall many times when we went through 2 confirmation processes, and you were always at the corner of the table, nodding or shaking your head, but watching and listening. And it's no surprise to me that you have stepped up, even with the cut. I think the mission of the Hay Plan is about recruitment, and it is about retention. It is about human capital, and it is about investing in our public servants, and it is about bringing it up to standards of today. And again, I've said this before, the process of the Hay Plan has integrity. It isn't something we just dreamt up. It's something that is there. The funding issue, I think the governor would be the last person who would want to implement something to have him come tumbling down. It just doesn't make sense to me for him to say we can do this if he couldn't do this. It's not going to be us falling. It's going to be him falling. And so, but mostly for the reasons of human capital, about that retention, about the recruitment and retention, appeals processes, there are things that we can form and mold and move forward as, right? And I think that's what this process is about. The Vice Speaker welcomes you to the table and thanking you. Because of your service, we are here able to do this, to deliberate, to argue, to decide what's best. And because of that, we will continue to do that. So I appreciate very much you finding your courage and your voice. It could have been a lot easier for you to be at the beach today, and I understand that. So for making the time to being here and for what you've done for us, sir, for our island, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker.
Again, thank you very much, Chief, and welcome. Welcome home. Are there any other employees out there that wish to be heard? Oh, we have one more. Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself and deliver your testimony.
I'm not part of any management team. I'm Maria Apron, and I'm sure you've all have heard from me one way or the other through phone or email. There's one question that Shane was addressed, and that's something that I can answer. How is a GovGuam employee going to be affected in the Hay study? And for myself, as a GovGuam employee with the Attorney General's office, there's going to be zero effects because I'm not entitled to that. I'm here basically to speak on behalf of the other 12 investigators in my office in the prosecution division. I've been there for about 8 years. Prior to that, I was with Guam Police Department, and it hasn't been a good quality of life at the workplace for most of us, because in December there's a lot of hype about giving pay raises, about tax refunds, and law enforcement pay. We are the sole agency that has not gotten our retro. And so when we talk about the Hay study, we have family members that are in GovGuam, and yes, we want them to get a pay raise. Who does not want that? But I hope that this body will not forget that there's still money owed to us. And we're not even asking close to the amount that the judiciary was allotted. It's in fact less than that. And I wish I was given a chance last time when they were here. And I can't speak as to why my bosses are not here, but I'm here, and I'd like to represent the rest of them that are still in my office who want to be heard and want this addressed as soon as possible. Because we're speaking of having people get paid by Valentine's Day, and we still haven't gotten ours. We also have families. So that's just a little bit of my pitch for today.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the fact that you did reach out to me by email.
And I
Thank you very
apologize
much
for sending that early in the morning.
Oh, no problem. I responded immediately, though the hour. But it is important that, and that was the reason why I posed the question to the administration, was that it's hard for those of you who were promised a 10-10-10 and didn't get it to believe that somehow you're going to be taken care of in this one, and you still haven't been taken care of in a previous obligation. And so I'm glad that you did come today. I know that others from your office did email me and indicate that they were supportive of the idea, but I'm glad that everybody is working on what their job. But I wanted someone, and I did tell a couple of the others that I wanted somebody to come, and even if it was at 2:30, I was going to allow you to be heard, that there are still some of you that are a little credulous about whether or not you're going to be taken care of, because you haven't been taken care of when everybody else was receiving their.
Yes, and all we're asking is just fair treatment, because the judiciary did get that. And, it's not a loan that we're asking or a handout. It's actually what's already been owed to us. So, we are convinced, and the rest of my colleagues are convinced, that you all can make that decision and making appropriations or amendments, and hopefully, make everybody happy.
In this Hay study, are you guys happy with the recommended letter that is going to be accorded you, or do you have question with the way that you?
Well, yes, there's going to be disparities, because for us who've been in law enforcement and in the GovGuam for no less than 10, 15, or 15 years,
all the investigators there have law enforcement experience, and I can say that we waited this long to get our law enforcement pay at the national level. Even with the prior pay we've been getting, it doesn't even amount to what we should be getting. But currently, we are content, and if you compare that with attorneys coming in fresh from law school, they're going to get $20,000 to $40,000 more than we are. So I can't speak for the rest, but personally for myself, I mean, you can't compare apples and oranges. You know, we have all different job descriptions, so they are going to have to speak on their behalf. I don't know for the rest of us.
But the letter that was assigned to the investigators for the Attorney General's office, you're satisfied with what was decided on?
For now, for the
Yeah.
law enforcement pay, yes.
Okay. Anybody? If not, thank you, and
Thank you, I
you for your
appreciate it.
patience. You're obviously a great investigator if you can sit there and wait until you get the evidence. All right, thank you.
Got to do what we have to do. Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you
day.
very much. With that, 4 hours later, this committee will call this informational hearing adjourned.